All right. Hello, 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 y'all. Welcome to our second Charmed panel. I am so excited to be here today. Today, we're going to be joined by Deanna, Diamond, Crystal, and not quite sure if Jim Anthony is going to be here yet, but if he does come, then Jim Anthony will be part of our panel. And Leia is here to just listen, take it all in, and just experience the greatness. She is one of our regular panelists, but today she's just taking it in. So let's start here because we had a lot going on these two episodes. Today we watched Brain Drain and Black is Coal. I want to start with Brain Drain because, and I wish Jim was here so he could give his opinion on this one. I would like to start with Brain Drain and just kind of see where you were with it. Like, what did you think of the episode? Did you have any thoughts that you maybe didn't get a chance to expand on? And we can start with Deanna, and it can just be anything. Any thoughts you had, any like a standout moment, anything like that. Deanna, my lovely. Okay. Well, I'm not sure. I guess I'm not sure what's going on. So Diamond, do you have any thoughts that you would like to share about brain drain?
Um, yeah, so I had a thought, but more of a question. I
Mhm.
wrote it down. Hold on a second, sorry. Here it goes. Okay. So my question, because I brain drain is one of my more one of the episodes that I do like. Like
Mhm.
I said, I had a sort of visceral reaction to kind of being like having some new information in my head that I didn't have when I've watched this episode previously. That
Mhm.
now I'm kind of there's some elements of it that I'm not a fan of.
Mhm.
Um, but I can sort of to some degree, not really, I can't really overlook them, but it doesn't really completely detract from my interest in the episode because I still like other things outside of the sort of framing, right? Like the framing of the episode was never what my favorite part about it was, so I can sort of set that aside and still enjoy the acting, which is really why I liked it. I felt like everybody did a really good job. Like that's some episodes I really feel like even if I don't really like the plot, if they did a really good job with the actors did a really good job with handling the material, I still really like it. And I really feel that way for this episode because I thought that like the other iterations of the source that we've had wouldn't have been able to perform that type of scene, right? Like, Michael Bailey Smith, I'm not saying that he can't act. Obviously he can act, but he's not going to give us that sort of psychological element.
Mhm.
And so I feel like that was really interesting who they chose to represent the source, because even though he's been in different people's bodies and different things like that, it was really interesting who they chose to represent the source in that sort of sinister way.
Mhm.
Um, but the thing that I'm really interested in delving into, with everybody and discussing is did Piper create the world versus the source? And so the specific question I wrote down was how does it change the view of the episode if Piper is the one creating the world and creating the scenario versus the source is the one creating it? Because I can see it either way. I always thought it was the source that was creating it, because there seems to be information that Piper wouldn't have that she does have in the world, right?
Mhm.
So to me, it's like the source is obviously giving her that. And I know that Piper's like, obviously the source is using, like, because my thought process was when the source began the spell or the ritual, that it gave him full access to Piper's mind, which is why it was taking so much. And he was having to create that psychic link between them. And
Mhm.
then because he had so much access to her, he was able to use he basically could use her memories, her thoughts, and all of that to sort of like, because he was in her head, he knew what she would want to say to herself. So to some degree, she created it because those thoughts were already in her head, but then he took them and used them against her. That's how I always saw it.
Mhm.
But then there, it does seem like some of the things, like with the really, like with the jokes that Phoebe were making, right? That's not really how Phoebe jokes. So it would make sense that but Piper would say like that, he sure flew. That is such a Piper line that I was like, yeah, maybe Piper is the one coming up. But part of me wants to say that Piper's only manifesting Paige and Phoebe to some degree, you know? Like
Mhm.
that's part like that maybe the source didn't necessarily expect them to be there. Like he didn't necessarily create them to be with her, and she did create them. And then, but since they don't have any powers, he realized there wasn't really anything that he could stop. He could, it wasn't anything that was going to stop his plan. So he didn't see the point in bothering with it. But even that kind of is just like a throwaway to kind of make it, but or kind of me stretching a little bit to make a theory fit. But at the end of the day, I look at this episode a little bit differently now, but at the end of the day, I don't it has I don't dislike it. Nothing that I learned about it today made it like sort of ruined it for me, something like that. So I do like it, and I really think it's a good flexing of Holly's acting, because I feel like some of the stuff, like the like getting hit and the waking up and then the like, yelling at the like when she was getting put in a straitjacket and stuff. It was like a little bit like we haven't really seen Holly like that as much. So I thought she did a good job with the acting as well. So that's my thoughts on it.
So wait, so were you asking a question or was it because
Oh,
you
so that's my thoughts overall, but I do want to know if everybody thinks like if Piper was the one that created the world or if it was the source that created the world, and it, like how does that change it, right? Like how does it change the view of it overall? If we say the source created it, what does that mean about it? Versus if we're saying Piper created this world, what does that really say about Piper and what she might be needing that she's not receiving, if the way that she is the first thing that happens to her, she changes her home into an insane asylum.
yeah.
Like what does that say about the help that she might need that she's not receiving? So those are my comments, but then also that question of like, how do you view that? Like, is Piper the one creating the world, the internal world, or is the source really creating it?
Um I will say that for me, and I'll just try to, keep my answers because I know, we have some other people to answer, but for me, I think that if Piper is the one that created the world, I think it's more of a personal experience for her versus if the source does it, it does give it more of that creepy kind of like manipulative vibe. I mean, all of it is manipulative by nature, but for Piper, for the world to actually reflect what Piper thinks versus just thoughts that he's putting in her mind, I think it makes it a strong POV episode for her. And it gives us a little bit more understanding of where she's at in her grief process, where she's at with her acceptance of Paige. Because what's interesting is that we see her start doing a lot more hand holding with Paige after this episode. And to me, I think that's because Piper had time to reflect and she had a chance to see and hear what she perceives Paige to be saying. Because there's one thing to like hear it internally, but or to hear it externally, and another one to kind of like acknowledge it internally. So for me, from that perspective, it makes it a really good reflective episode, albeit, one that is forced on her, but maybe reflective isn't the right word because that sounds positive. A good POV episode. I'm gonna just keep it at that. But if the source is the one that's creating all these different elements, then it kind of takes that away because it feels more manufactured than it already is. And it feels like more of a cartoon version of what Piper's life is, if that makes sense. Um, So even setting it in the manner, like if it's Piper that put herself there, that to me really signals how she feels about the manor. It really signals that she sees the manor as safe, but then also a place that she's stuck in, and that the outside world really moves at a normal pace and everyone else is able to go through their daily lives, where she's stuck there in a place that she probably has called an insane asylum at some point, or she's called it a crazy house or something like that. So it makes it feel much more like Piper. Versus if the source makes it into an insane asylum, or a mental health hospital, then it takes that element away and it just seems like a place to use, a place that means something to Piper to torture her. So it's not, it sounds kind of like I'm saying the same thing, but because I kind of am to a certain extent, but the perspective of it just gives it different meaning. Because if the source is just using it, then it's kind of like, well, of course he's going to use, the manor because that's a place that's significant to her. That's a place that means something to her. That's a place that is important in her life and where she feels safe. And he's trying to break that. Whereas if Piper is the one who's created it, then, oh, so she does see this as a place that she's stuck in. That's not normal. That's, keeping her there and trying to repress her from having a quote unquote normal life. Because I think that's another thing that it all kind of boils down to is, although I don't like saying the word normal in this respect to make it seem like if you have mental health issues, you're not normal, because that's not what I mean. I think Piper has a very clear line between like what normal and not normal means. And her mind is trying to like create a scenario that's not normal to reflect how different her life is from the people on the outside of the house. Like when I'm out there, I can blend in and be a normal person, but when I'm here, I can't. And am I just making all this up? You know what I mean? Like it gives it that much more personal touch to who her character is if it's her that created this universe. And the source just kind of facilitated it. I
I
hope.
agree. I
Mhm.
agree with you. There's a different impact that it has if Piper created this world in her mind versus if the source just used this torture device. It
Mhm.
has a completely different impact. I agree with you. I wholeheartedly agree with you.
Mhm. Well, thank you, because I look. I know I kind of went overboard with explaining it, but I just want to
No,
make.
it's all good. All good.
Yeah, no, I mean, I definitely 100% see how like, obviously I understand the difference between the impacts, like what it means to have Piper create the same thing versus what it means for the source. I feel like, to me, if the source's goal is to get Piper to question wanting to have her powers and exploit that element of it, that this is a way to get her to do that. And I totally definitely, but I see how, like, I just wish, because we don't get, like, you know what I'm saying? We don't get it in the episode, right? We don't get it in the episode where it even really kind of gives us, like, I mean, we can speculate, right? And maybe there is, maybe I'm missing it, but to me, nothing in the episode ever really said to me, Piper's coming up with this. To me, the episode really tries to make you think that it is the source creating all of this, right? But maybe it is Piper, and that's because, to me, like, before, I didn't view Piper and Leo's relationship the same way. And so utilizing Leo as an aspect of, like, an evil element of it, to me was like, oh, the source is doing this because why in your mind is your husband, the love of your life, working against you, right? But I didn't understand that concept, so I was like, it must be the source doing it. But now the idea that, like, we've all kind of collectively agreed upon, not really agreed upon, it's not right to say, we've kind of all collectively, like, sort of like hinted at various times, like maybe Piper really felt like sort of backed into her relationship with Leo and kind of resents the position that he holds over her at times, and vice versa. I definitely think that that makes a lot of sense as well. But that's why I always thought that one way. And it wasn't until, y'all said today that it was, um, the source was just creating, the using the magic to let Piper create this so he could then exploit whatever Piper's mind created. That totally makes sense too, as well. So I was just, yes, that's just an interesting way to view it. I just was wondering, like, is there anything in the show either that y'all see that definitely specifically points it out to y'all? I definitely see it with, like, Paige's comments about, like, you don't think I'm as good as Prue and you don't have to say it and da 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 this and all that. I definitely see it with those comments. but then it's also very, like we said, the source put the chameleon in there to learn those specific things. So, yes, I just find it so interesting.
I think it's all led to be very like ambiguous, for a very specific reason, right? And like all this whole conversation has me thinking, so with being familiar with the craft in my personal life, but like there are things you can set up like on the outs. How can I explain this? Like when you get an outline to study for like your subjects in school, right? You get an outline. You don't get say, hey, you study this way, you study this way, you study this way. No, you find out what's personal to you, right? And you find out your ways of responding to what you need to study for. So I'm wondering if the source created a realm for her to act against her own self. Like, okay, I know I could plant Leo, I know I could plant Balthazar, I know I could plant her sisters, but those other orderlies and things like that, were they a part of Piper, or were they a part of the outline? And for me, with this idea that's coming up in this moment, it's just like I think they're more so it's a blend. I think there's an outline, and then Piper added her own chaos, if you will, to it by being in the manipulation spell, or whatever kind
Mhm.
of spell it was. It was obviously a mental manipulation spell, but still.
Yeah, I agree with that too. And I was thinking that what for me like that pointed out that it was Piper kind of making it up as well is that everything before, she gets caught by the source or whatever, it's like she was already in this mood. She was already like, I want a normal life. Like, why can't I have things the way I want them to be? Like, that's kind of what set it off for me and what made me think that it was more so her, being upset and frustrated with her life the way that it was and not being able to have it, normal. And maybe her
Yeah.
normal was like being in a institution because everything is so insane in her life.
Right.
Oh wow. Wow.
Yeah,
That
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 makes
that's a great point, Crystal.
Hmm.
very, very.
Because
Because
Pepper feels chaotic on a daily
Yeah,
basis. She,
every
yeah,
day.
she's like, this is a break for me. Thank you.
yeah.
Hmm.
And she's even told him before, like, everyone here needs a shrink. This whole family,
Yeah.
like, Piper
Mm.
sees them as a crazy house, quote unquote. You know what I mean? Like, that's how she sees them. And for me, I think a big way that we kind of see that it's more her versus the source is the fact that Phoebe and Paige have such specific characterization in this world. And even though it is almost like a parody when it comes to Phoebe, again, I think it makes more sense. Like, because so what? Was the chameleon demon just like moving around the house? Did he go from being a lamp to a rug? You know what I mean? Like,
That brings me to question though, did the source take in his knowledge when
I'm assuming
he
he did.
Right.
okay,
Me
okay,
too.
Yeah.
okay.
Hmm.
I'm assuming he extracted it. He had to.
Yeah.
I mean, unless the chameleon, maybe the chameleon was like
He
giving him the
reported to
information
him.
as he went. Like
Maybe.
he report back.
She likes cookies.
This one likes to wear her top a little bit off her shoulder.
Right, like what?
You
Like
know.
no, he only had the information that he almost got vanquished with when the laundry got vanquished, the
Hmm.
clock got taken out. He's like, this is all I got.
And then there's some stuff that he might have been able to get from Piper's subconscious. Um, but I really think the fact that Phoebe and because I think I might have said this during the watch, but to me, excuse me, Phoebe and Paige specifically were what made me go, oh, because Phoebe is a baby. Phoebe is a child there essentially, and she's jumping around and she's having fun and she's eating cookies and she's got chocolate and she da 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 da. And then when she goes and she sees Cole and she's trying to kiss at him like a little girl, like a teenager in puppy love would do, you know, to me that was Pippi, that was her, and she was really, I
Like that's
think
how she sees it.
that's how she
Hmm.
sees Phoebe. That's how she
Hmm.
looks at her. She sees, and I love my baby down, but I think Piper is realistic enough to know like Phoebe is she's a little immature sometimes. And I
Mm,
think that's
frivolous.
how Piper sees her internally. And the same thing with Paige. Like I said, Paige was much more lucid. Paige was a lot stronger. Paige was fighting the orderlies back where Phoebe wasn't. Paige was giving Piper sass. She was very direct and very straight with what she was saying. And I think that that's how Piper sees Paige because Paige doesn't act like that necessarily in that house. Like she doesn't come there and do that kind of stuff. So unless the chameleon demon just been riding around,
Ooh, and maybe
what?
I was like, and maybe it's because she doesn't know Paige that well that she's coming across more of as herself and also like projecting things, saying like, "Oh, you don't really like me," and stuff
Yeah.
like that, like things that maybe Piper may have felt deep down or not felt, but like
Is dealing with.
just kind of indifferent towards her. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? So maybe that was a thing too.
hmm And being concerned that, she's not being inviting to Paige. Like I said, we start seeing a
Hmm.
lot more hand holding. So I think that's Piper's conscious effort to make her feel more included.
Yes.
Um, but the thing that really got me was like when Paige started saying, I tried to play your little witchy games and be a part of your coven, but I can't be like your precious Prue. You know, to me, I think that from a literal standpoint, Piper has probably heard Paige say things akin to that. But what
Hmm.
it makes me think back to more is the little moments where they've been fighting the past couple of episodes. Paige, we shouldn't do this, and Paige being like, "Girl, I'm gonna do it anyway." Like she sees Paige as that very strong, rooted person. And again, I think it goes back to because that's not how Piper is. Like if you listen
Mm.
to Paige talk, she low key sounded a little bit like Prue, if
True.
we're being
Yeah.
100% honest. And
Yeah.
so to me, I think that comes from, and I'm doing a lot of talking. I promise I'm gonna wind it on down. I think that comes from the fact that Piper herself is not very she
Confident.
confident. Yes, like Piper will speak up for herself. She will do certain things, and she's starting to kind of get that for herself. But she sees Paige as that person already. And so it would make sense to me because the source is only going to be able to really go so far in characterizing them like that. And so to me, worst case scenario, the source is bringing Piper's subconscious to life. Um,
Mm.
I think Piper saw her as Paige, saw Paige as that since day one, since he like because
yes.
Paige has always been so independent, just like Prue.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
So she probably had that thought in there since get go, like, oh damn, no, this my sister.
Mm-hmm. hmm And we see that Paige is willing to call them out and be like, okay, well, you're married to our white lighter and Phoebe's shaking up with a demon. So now what?
Well, now what?
What's
Right.
the
So
other
what else
line?
is going on?
Right.
Exactly. And so I think the fact that because Piper really didn't know what to say, she was just like, okay, because Piper doesn't know. Piper didn't know how to handle those kind of moments with Prue necessarily. Like she would either kind of go back and forth with her or she would just be like, girl, whatever. And I think that that's why Paige was characterized like that because she sees her that way. So
I
that's
like.
kind of what makes me believe that this is a world of Piper's making and the source just sort of facilitated it coming to life because it would also make a lot more sense to use Piper's own mind against her than try to create every single person there because it's if you're
Hence the outline. Yep.
there you go. Exactly. That's the outline. Like, because if you're gonna try to use personal information against her, there's only so far that you can go from somebody that's been standing in the room. There's only so far because people don't talk out loud. You know what I mean? Like, nobody is going to
No.
stand in the middle of the living room and be like, I sure do miss Prue. And sometimes I feel like I really am not giving Paige a chance because you know what I mean? Like, yeah, they probably have those kind of conversations. Don't get me wrong. Like, we've seen them have personal discussions, but it's only going to go so far in you being able to mimic that. Like, you're going to have to use that against them in a way that they can understand, in a way that they can conceptualize in a way that's going to really reflect what they feel versus what you've heard. Because I could stand in a room in the middle, stand in the middle of a room all day and say strawberry pudding, and then you go in my mind and be like, he hates strawberry pudding. He likes chocolate. He just saying
Right.
he likes strawberry because them people said they like strawberry. So that's what I mean. Like I feel like the source knew he had to get a little bit deeper than just.
Oh,
Mhm.
you know what adds to that is the fact that Piper didn't know where she was. She didn't, she thought she was in the manor under a spell, or that the like there was some kind of spell or illusion going on. She didn't real well, I wouldn't even say illusion because she didn't realize that either. It's like she didn't even she thought she was dealing with her sister. She thought she was dealing with Leo. She thought she was dealing with Cole eventually, but she never realized up until she did that it's like not her world. So that makes me think is like this is her projected into a spell that then is reflecting her mental.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yes. And I think I think that might be too why Cole didn't have anything to do. Why he was just there. And
Oh, say
because
more about that.
well, because Cole is not a part of Piper's life. Cole is a part of Phoebe's life. If
She's like,
this
that's not my problem.
no, I mean truly, truly. I mean, and we've been talking over the course of the past couple episodes about how Leo looks out for Pippi and Cole looks out for Phoebe. So I really think that's why Cole just made one little brief appearance and was like, and then we moved on. Because for Piper, Cole holds no real day-to-day significance. That's why we see Leo coming to her side. That's why she's calling for Leo. That's why he's coming to, shoot her up with something. That's why he's the one that she's looking to back her up, and he actually doesn't because her subconscious knows that he's not there for her, but that's neither here nor there. We'll
Mm-hmm.
get to that. But that's why he takes such a center role, and even why he's the one I feel like that kind of pushes her away and is like, no, just focus on me. Just don't listen to them. They're delusional. Say the spell. That's why it's Leo, and that's why we don't see Cole.
She
Especially
doesn't even tell Phoebe to go after Cole. Like,
mm-hmm.
where's Cole?
She tells Phoebe like, "Girl, we ain't got time for that. Come on." Because that's how
Put
that's
the
how
cookie
Piper
down.
sees it. And I think that that's really reflected when you start thinking about the fact that like, yeah, Piper went in on Paige for a second, but again, that was to feed into the delusion of the family. He's good, which I know that's kind of, whatever, but I'm using that as an example to say like Piper clocks in to defend Cole when she kind of has to, but of her own accord, Piper's not gonna be like, I wonder how Cole is doing today.
No, she's defending Phoebe.
Yeah, hey,
She's
boom.
defending
She's
Phoebe. She's not
defending
defending
Phoebe.
Cole.
That's exactly it. That's exactly it. She couldn't care less about Cole. She is defending Phoebe. I don't mean that to say like
No,
Piper,
it's true. It's true. It's
but
just funny because it's true.
yeah, I think that's why he took such a back seat in her delusion because he wasn't the focus. He's not an important person. Like if
He doesn't
Leo,
contribute or not contribute to the delusion.
yes, and he could contribute or not contribute to their situation. So like
Mm,
Leo is the one that they're gonna go to for guidance. If Cole can help, they'll take it, but Piper's not gonna automatically say we need to get Cole in here to help us make these decisions.
right, because he wasn't around for the past 2 weeks anyway.
Uh-huh. And they operated just fine, probably a little bit better than just fine.
Well, well,
Mm-hmm.
well,
Well, yes.
well.
But no, I know I'm doing a lot of Diamond, did you have any kind of like
It's a good
I,
question though, because we mentioned it earlier. It's a really
yeah,
good question.
very,
Mm-hmm.
very good. Very, very good. So Diamond, did you have any kind of like observations or questions about anything? Because like I said, I love explaining. Uh, Hello?
I think sometimes people walk away for a second.
Yeah, I think she might have just. Lana Walker.
I there was a you said something that made me think of a question I had, but go my bad, my bad. Go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead. Go ahead.
No,
It's
I can't think of the question. That's why I said my bad. I can't think of it because it was something that really made me think on the first episode earlier. Because it wasn't my favorite. So I was just really just trying to look into the episode.
About Leo, because I want to talk about
Crystal, go ahead and let's Crystal, go
Yeah.
ahead and open up the discussion about Lily.
it. This is one of my favorite episodes. I said that
Oh,
before, but yeah, okay. But
oh.
it's crazy that watching it, in real time, like when it actually came on and things like that, I didn't think anything about Leo.
Mhm.
Um, I never really felt a way towards Leo till later on in life. But it's crazy that in Piper's mind, Leo still is not a help to her, but he's never a help to her in real life.
Mhm.
So it's kind of like that's just what it is, and she accepts that. And
Yeah.
so it's just like,
Mm.
wow.
Yeah.
I don't know. I wanted to hear what you were going on about that because I'm like, I know how you feel about Leo, and you have definitely opened my eyes to the kind of person he is, and it's just like, wow, I never thought about that.
That definitely brings a question to me.
Mhm. I will say that Leo to me, it's interesting the way he's portrayed this episode because again,
I'm
like you
ready for
said, he's not helpful. Actually, he's the opposite of helpful. But even more, the fact that he's still in a place where he is over Piper.
it.
Like, yes, he's a doctor, but he's not just a doctor, he's her attending doctor. And he has the ability to give her medicine that'll calm her down. And they have to sneak around, which is
It's still
it's
inappropriate.
inappropriate, it's unethical. And to say like, oh, once you get better we can be together, it
Yeah.
even in her mind, Piper places the real weight of their ability to be together on herself. Like,
Hmm.
she has to get better so that they can be together. She has to get better so that they don't have to sneak around anymore. She has to change herself in order to let herself be with Leo, because Leo is normal. Leo is good. Leo is perfectly fine. He has no issues. It's her. She's the flawed one. She's the one that has to be taken care of. She's the one that Leo has to break the rules to be with. And so it's just interesting that she still sees him that way.
Hmm.
Now, I can excuse some stuff, kind of like him taking her to the side, because I do feel like the source was controlling Leo, that version of Leo at that point. But, and really, I think he might have been controlling him the whole time. But at
Yeah.
least what he says, let me say that, at
The
least what he
dialogue,
says.
yeah.
Yes.
Because that part seemed very, very shallow. And when I say shallow, what I mean is like Phoebe and Paige had very specific characterizations. They were a what I would consider reflection of how Piper sees them. Where someone like Leo in her delusion state, whatever, he seemed like a reflection of the situation. Oh, we can't be together because I'm a doctor and you're a patient. That one seemed a little plug and play to me.
Mm.
I I have a thought.
Mhm.
If well, you I don't know if you paused or you stopped. Sorry.
No, 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 go ahead.
Are you sure? Because I
Yes,
don't want to cut you off. Because I know just sometimes we take a second to pause.
you're fine. Thank you though, but you're fine.
I I think it's coming like the conversation we had even yesterday, right? I'm not sure if it's on the excuse me, the rewatch or the after show, but I remember questioning, are we looking at white lighters in the appropriate way? Like, are we looking at them as
Mhm.
guides or are we looking at them as like hands-on help, right?
Right.
Because that then brings me to Piper's state that she was in Brain Drain. Is like, okay, a doctor is essentially a guide. You cannot the doctor can't make you take pills. The doctor can't make you get surgery. The doctor can't make you do anything. You have to decide to do these things. So, with that being said, we're seeing essentially the same relationship, like you're saying, inside of her mind, but it's coming across as this immoral, inappropriate thing, which it is on both ends, inside and outside of her mind. To the magical community is inappropriate, and in her mind, she obviously knows it's inappropriate on some level. But we're seeing a depiction of a guy that's not supposed to have a hand on, but a guide to, if that makes sense.
That does make a lot of sense. And ever since you said that, like I see a lot more of what you mean. And I think that because the show uses words sometimes that don't kind of match
Yep.
kind of match what's really supposed to be happening. I think maybe or they use words and then have different expectations. I think that may be what's going on. Because I think you're right. It's kind of like when you brought when y'all brought you and Diamond were both talking about like rituals and things like that. That was such a good point that ritual has such a different meaning to where if you just watch a show, you're gonna think, okay, ritual means we're doing X, Y, and Z.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why it was jarring when Prue was like, "Oh, you came up with a ritual that fast?" Because I'm like, "Girl, she's just holding a candle or a little crystal." And but I was like, "No, that's a ritual." And I think ultimately it goes back to what you've been saying about like intention in this show. Um,
You really listen to me. Let me stop. Let me stop.
mm, no, I heard you say it one time and I wrote it down so I wouldn't forget.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, don't don't get too excited. But no, I think intention, like ever since you said that, I've looked at this show kind of really from a different perspective. And but back to the white lighter thing, to me, because white lighters are supposed to guide, whatnot, but we never really get an instant of what that means because Leo has such a personal investment in their lives. And so when they make these big decisions, Natalie is just like, oh, well, I'm gonna go up to the elders, and then when I come back, then y'all, you can kind of make your decision from there. That's how it's supposed to go. But
Right.
Leo is so heavily involved in what they're doing that when he doesn't get directly involved, it genuinely feels like he's just abandoning them.
I was gonna say that earlier in the episode in the rewatch, where we're so comfortable with him being there when it's because of the personal relationship he has, which is why
Hmm.
he's always there. And it's just like, why is he doing nothing? Because this is what he's used to doing.
Hmm.
And that's no shade. That's just like he's not used to always having to be around, but because he's married, or yeah, because he's married to one of his charges, now he's around as a husband. And we're like, okay, so why aren't you acting as a guide? Why aren't you acting as a
Even the
white lighter?
source knows it because it's like he more than likely was definitely um, guiding or like being Leo in that world. So
Hmm.
it's like, so they even know that he's typically useless uh, all the time.
And you know what's funny? They think that about white lighters, period.
Yeah,
They
they think
do.
that way already. Yep.
They do. You know what? That's
It
a
was
really
very easy for him to imitate it.
hmm That's a really good point. They switch on and they switch off who they're referring to in moments. That's why, like Piper is saying, we can't have a demon in the family, but then you're also reading Paige about how Cole is a different person. He's not that same entity anymore. What? That doesn't make any sense.
Right.
And it's
People
the
don't.
same thing with the white lighters. We hate white lighters, the elders. We don't trust them, but Leo's fine because one of us is born.
It goes back into how the Halliwells really treat each other, and the gaslighting, and their first instinct is, I won't even say gaslighting. I'm gonna be very real. That like their first instinct with each other is to deny
Yes.
and to like make you feel wrong or like crazy. Like that's
Yeah.
literally their first response. I always say responses, not reactions. They're reacting. they're not responding. They're reacting to what they're hearing, and and they don't listen to each other. So Paige is like, I don't operate like this. I'm a social worker. My parents listened to me when I had things to say. And this is like, y'all need to think about what you're saying to each other.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Exactly. You can't just throw words out there, baby, and hope that, hope for the best. Because, I mean, we even kind of see it. This is another point that I really, 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 really want to go back to. Um, in Brain Drain, when Paige calls out the fact that Piper just earlier that day wanted to give up her powers, Phoebe says,
Put up your dukes.
"You don't know, you don't know what you're talking about."
Real
Then she
quick.
then she immediately goes back and apologizes. But later on, when Paige brings it back up and kind of says what Phoebe said as like a way to summarize, and she's like, "You said Piper has a spell in her mind, right?" Phoebe says, "Well, yeah, but you don't know Piper the way that I do," or however she said it. She said like, "Yeah, but I also know Piper better than you do," or something like that, or blah 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 blah, and she would never say it. And it was just a weird thing to where
Yeah, I feel
Paige
like when
then
it
is
comes
like,
to stuff
okay,
like
but
this.
Paige
Yeah.
is like, okay, but if it's there and the source is in her mind, then we should be in her mind, right? And it's like we're watching them kind of like start to work together, and Phoebe's like, oh, then that's where we need to be because we can da 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 da, and it's like
Mm-hmm.
Phoebe did not come up with that plan
No,
because Phoebe was too busy telling Paige,
dismissing her.
yeah, dismissing her, and by reminding her that she does not know what she's talking about because she doesn't know Piper because she didn't grow up with him. She basically was telling them like, "Girl, you are new here, okay? You just started going here. Please hush."
You
And
just enrolled.
you just enrolled. You haven't even taken your first class yet. Sit down. Go back to your quiz. Go back to your quiz, okay? Um,
But these are the things that need to be said.
they are. They absolutely are.
Like a
And so
fresh perspective.
Right.
I
Because
would
to your point, she doesn't know Piper. So exactly. So why would I not have a fresh eye to this?
Hmm.
Exactly. Exactly. They're so used to operating from a place of excusing each other and no, we couldn't and just turning a blind eye. They don't know what to do when the lens is put on them. So I would kind of like to know what everyone thinks of that moment. Diamond, I'm not sure if are you still here?
Sorry, what was that?
Oh no, I was just asking if you were still here.
Yeah, I was. I was just. I had grabbed some food and I was munching on tortilla chips, and so you know how loud that
Oh
can
yeah.
be. And then I just had to step to the restroom, so I need to finish washing my hands.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Go ahead, go ahead. No, you're fine. I just want to make sure before I got to asking too many questions. Um, so Jim or Crystal, I'm not sure if Deanna is still on because if she is,
I'm here.
okay. So did do you are you okay to answer the question or are you doing some-
No, I'm sorry. I was doing homework at the same time. But if you could repeat your question, I would love to answer it.
I was asking if you had any thoughts about um Phoebe telling Paige that she doesn't know Piper as well as she does in Brain Drain.
The way that I viewed it, like how I was watching it, well, yeah, how I was interpreting what was happening was Phoebe was just really, overwhelmed. I think I was just viewing it from the where, like, all right, she lost Prue, and now Piper is taken by the source who sent Shax to kill Prue. So she was just really, I feel like it was just like an overwhelming thing. Paige is giving out ideas that sometimes when somebody's telling you something and you're just overwhelmed, you just dismiss everything. And because I know I do that personally. If I'm already overwhelmed, somebody's telling me something that I probably need to hear, but I'm not in the mood to hear it, then I will dismiss that fact completely until I'm able to calm down or I hear it a different way, which isn't a good thing, but I do see where it was like I understand where it was going, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Um, because the thing is, with Paige, I think really trying to offer up something to this dynamic, they Piper and Phoebe, when things get really tough, they kind of fall back on they have each other, and they kind of go back into that headspace of we've been doing it like this because we know what we're doing. I think that may be a little bit of why Phoebe definitely responded that way. Um, Crystal, what did you think of the moment?
I thought it was really kind of like how Jim was saying that that's their way of dealing with each other sometimes.
Yeah.
Like they like to deny whatever they're talking about or dismiss it because, whatever reason, they just, a little dysfunctional in that way.
Yeah.
But yeah, she definitely just was dismissing her and not reflecting or taking any of it in that she was saying in the moment. So it could also be like how Deanna's saying, like, she's just too overwhelmed, too busy to really lock in and understand what Paige is trying to say. Like, okay, you were there, girl. You saw her saying, she's tired of this and talking about making deals and stuff like that. Like, why weren't you, you know, picking up on that a little bit?
Yeah. Yeah. Because it's a lot. I think, and then again, and also added in is the fact that like Phoebe really was stressed, and probably to a bigger extent than she has been this whole time, because
Mm-hmm.
she just had the vision of the Source killing them. So
Mm-hmm.
for her, it's kind of like, girl, we,
I thought that. Yeah.
we got to do something about this.
You got to move, move.
Exactly. Um, and it again, I think is Phoebe's mind trying to protect her, but at the same time, like I said, she's under that amount of stress to where she's like, okay, I kind of need to be in control of this, but then Paige also got stuff she's trying to say, so it's like I'm not trying to talk bad. It kind of gives I'm not trying to talk bad about Piper a little bit.
Mhm. Yeah. But you were
Um,
right there seeing what, you must not have even took that in when Piper was saying it. She was giving
mhm.
that in, like just dismissing what she's saying.
But we also have to remember too, for Paige, this is really the first time she's heard Piper talk about giving up them powers.
Hmm.
Maybe she hears it every other week,
So she was like, whatever.
Yeah, she's like, you know what? That actually does give that new context because
Hmm.
I've never thought about it like that before. Paige really is just now hearing Piper say for the first time, like, let's give up these powers. I'm sick of it. I don't want to do this no more. Whereas Phoebe is like, girl, we've been doing the same rigmarole for 3 years. That might be what she meant. It's just like
She's
when
always
she
saying
said
that.
you don't know Piper like I do. It's like, girl, this girl was ready to give up magic over some boots that she ain't. I promise.
Right. Yeah. I didn't think about it that way either, but that definitely makes sense. Like she always do that.
Jim Anthony, do you have any thoughts about that?
The latter statements, or you mean the original question about the exchange with Phoebe and
Uh,
Paige?
both of them, either or,
Both.
both of
Um,
them.
with the exchange with Phoebe and Paige, I really think Phoebe doesn't handle crises well. Like she does not know
Mm-hmm.
how to like she doesn't handle well at all under
Mm-hmm.
pressure. And she starts again reacting, like I was saying earlier, like she starts spitting out venom towards everybody, like she gets mad.
Mm-hmm.
It's isn't she a Scorpio?
She is.
So it's like that stinger comes out,
Mm-hmm.
like in her and when she's frustrated, but it's like your sister slash stranger is asking you a question that is genuinely trying to be of help, and you're like, you don't. in these, I think it was more so along the line, she said, in these kinds of things, you don't know her like I do. And it's just like, you're absolutely right. Like, this is why I'm questioning the things that you're doing right now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And trying to, again, like I said, bring a fresh perspective to things. So I expect that from Phoebe, and it disappoints me every time. Well, I should say I can't be disappointed if I expect it, right? That's an oxymoron. But it's saddening every time she does do something like that to anybody that she loves, or even an innocent. She does that to innocents too. It's just like you so easily dismiss help, guidance, and even things you're literally asking for.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're asking Leo to listen to you about you not vanquishing Cole, but then you're demanding that he understands what you're sharing with him. It's just like, no, you asked me to listen to you, girl.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I say that to say she expects certain understanding without giving understanding to those she loves the most.
Yeah.
And that's what that moment really says to me, because that's a very Phoebe thing to do. It's just like, girl, you don't know her.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's always a dismissal when she's in that type of moment. When she's under pressure, she's not going to crack because she's about to punch something.
Mm-hmm.
She's going to make sure you crack before the crack starts showing on her.
Yeah. Oh, that's a very, very good point. That is a
That
very
is, yes. Very
mm-hmm.
Scorpio too.
Yeah, because that's that reaction. It's like, okay, I'm
Mhm.
not gonna think, I'm just gonna spew venom at that because I don't want to deal with myself right now, or I haven't thought about that. So you don't need to reflect on me right now.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Oh, yes, yes, yes. And that actually gives me a thought. But before I share that, Diamond, did you have anything that you wanted to kind of add in on that?
So yeah, I mean, I had kind of been my thought process had kind of been like, well, because of the fact that they're always like every time Piper is at the edge and being like, "Oh, I'm gonna give up my power," she always she always, just keeps going on being a witch and doing the same thing. Like she never actually does anything about it. But then on top of that, like let's pause and talk about the idea that maybe Piper might give up her powers. Really, do we need to do that right now? Like, regardless of whether she might actually do it or not, all that does is add time pressure, right? And we're already under a time pressure anyways because the source has Piper. So even if he's not trying to give up her powers, he could find a way to kill her. So it's like it's not really worth it to have that discussion right now, you know? So like not to say that
Mhm.
that's necessarily where Phoebe's coming from, but it kind of was like, yeah, even like just you don't know her like I do. Let's move on because it's like, what's the point in that right now? And we've already said, Phoebe's quick to turn away from difficult conversations, and it is a difficult conversation because Phoebe at times has wanted to not be a witch, even though not really, but she gets it. So that conversation in general is very difficult, especially for Paige right now, where we've seen little moments of it with Paige, but Paige is still in that sort of new, excited about being a witch phase, right? So it's like Paige has been like, I don't want to do this anymore. It's not as much fun. But then, really, has Paige really wanted to give up her powers? Not yet. But then later on, we do see where she gets to that point where she's fed up. But even still, she's less likely to want to give that up. So it's like, it's kind of almost like Phoebe's like, you don't get it. And they do really say that out loud to her in this season. You don't get it. You don't understand it because you haven't been through what we've been through.
Yeah.
Oh
Yeah.
And
yeah.
so, or is that the end of, or is that season
That's at
five?
the end of the season 4. Yeah, they do
Yeah.
say.
So it's like, yeah. So they're like, you don't get it. And so it's like kind of like a twofold. It's kind of like, well, Piper's always threatening to give up her powers and not be a witch, and she never sticks to it. So she's whatever. One, and then two, even if Piper didn't want to be a witch anymore, she definitely wasn't going to give up her power, like actually give up her powers to the source, because she knows how bad that could be for the world. Like Piper's not stupid enough to think that if she gives the source her powers, the charmed one's powers, that the source is not going to lay waste to them just in case to be safe. You know what I'm saying?
Mm.
So yeah, so it kind of seemed like an moment, but to me it kind of was more like just like Crystal and everybody's kind of been saying like Phoebe just being a little bit overwhelmed and not dealing well, like Jim was saying with like not dealing well with not knowing how to take the lead in a chaotic situation when it's not about the witchcraft of it all, when it's about the emotion of it all, when it's about the strategicness of it all, when it's about the let's be caring and give a listening ear. That's not where Phoebe takes charge and takes lead, but she's really good at taking charge and taking lead when it comes to the like witchy side of stuff, right? So it's like she still is avoiding that and being that like sort of middle, playing that sort of middle ground and being a big sister when she really hasn't had a big, like she really hasn't ever had to play that role before. And right now, both of her big sisters that she would look to are gone at the moment. Like neither of them is available to her for various reasons. So
Mhm.
yeah, I think it is an interesting moment between the two of them, and I do think that they consistently push in Paige's face during this time that she is an outsider,
Yeah.
and it's in a way of like you're aggravating me, so shut up. And it's like that's kind of like it's very they're very quick to be like you're aggravating me, so shut up, you know?
Right.
And it's almost kind of like they're too quick to treat Paige like a sister. And this is a TikTok video I've made before, or I've had a TikTok video about this before, but I deleted it because you know how people get about when
Yeah.
you talk about the sisters. So I
Mm.
might post it again, but I've talked about how like Piper and Phoebe don't really help usher Paige into what it means to have sisters and to be in a sistership with more than one person, right? Because there are times where you're maybe going to have, like when she said, like, I heard y'all were thinking of having a baby. And then she's like, oh, did I just break some sister rule? It's like they don't, you know, like they have to have those conversations with her about what it means to like be in a sistership where sometimes you're going to go to one sister to complain about the other sister. And that sister should not go and tell that other sister what you said, you know? And I don't think they don't help her enough with navigating that. And sometimes they default to treating her like she's been their sister forever and knows that they kind of quip at each other like that. And they're kind of a little not mean to her, but they're a little bit more cutting to Paige, I think, than they should be at first because they're not realizing how much their words can affect her because they're used to talking to each other that way. And they're not really considering that she's never really had sisters talk to her that way. And it may affect her differently than how it's affected y'all. So yeah, that's kind of like, and that's an example of it where it's like why would you say that to somebody like why like that's a, like it was mean the way Phoebe said it like I understand why, but it was mean and it was a little uncalled for. Paige is just trying to make a moment of connection with you, and you're basically like, shut up, you don't know what you're talking about.
You know what's funny that what you're saying about the moment between them and Paige trying to connect, right? I never took it as Paige trying to find like an understanding in sisterhood, right? I never you're making me think about that part, right? Because
Mhm.
I took that took that moment as, hey, this is a way we can get in some insight to solve this magical problem, not, hey, let's address this thing our sister said earlier. It's so crazy. I've never thought about it that way. And I really think that, or I've always thought that like Paige was just trying to say, hey, if she said this earlier, this is a possibility. So let's act on this. So that's where I always came from. And then you're making me realize that Phoebe's reacting to not having the conversation more so as opposed to not accepting the help, the
Mhm.
magical help.
Mhm.
Yeah, I never saw it as her rejecting the magical help because she then does kind of go with the plan. She does go with the idea. She's like, oh, I do realize it. I, even if maybe Paige was just trying to offer up some sort of magical help and assistance and, you know, outside of the box thinking, it seemed to me like Phoebe was interpreting as like, I'm not trying to have this conversation about what Piper might potentially do as far as not wanting to be a witch. Like, is it possible that Piper might be down there right now negotiating with the source to give up our powers and to not come after each other anymore? Is it possible that that's what she's doing? And like Phoebe, to some degree, can't 100% be certain that Piper wouldn't do that, right? She can't be because she doesn't know what possible torture the source could be putting Piper through in order to make Piper. Like she didn't know, they didn't imagine that this was what was happening until the very end, so to speak, at that when Paige kind of came up with that idea. So to me, it always kind of came across as Phoebe rejecting having the conversation about Piper, not her rejecting any sort of help from Paige.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yep. Because I think another thing that y'all are making me kind of think more about, and we've been talking about this as like the season's gone on, especially I think in Hell Hath No Fury. Piper and Phoebe, Honest to God. And I don't think this is one of those like his proof needed to be gone. I don't think it's one of those kind of moments. I think it just makes you realize, and I think that's kind of the point of it, is how much they did rely on Prue for things. Because am I saying that Prue came up with every single plan? No. What I am saying is that they didn't have to handle crises alone. And even when Prue wasn't there, Leo would be involved in some kind of direct way where they could kind of have someone to be like, okay, this is what you need to prioritize. This is what you need to do. Da, da, da. And then, but they would also take the lead in it, but they were together. And now because they're in this situation where if Piper's missing, that means Phoebe has to take the lead. If Phoebe's missing, that means the Piper has to take the lead. And I think they're really struggling with doing that because Paige is not necessarily yet at this point where she can come up with the plan and how to vanquish the demon because Paige again your normal average everyday person is not just gonna have to come up with plans to thwart an enemy on a day-to-day basis. So
especially
I
a demon.
especially a demon. Exactly. So I think that's another thing that we're watching too is them both putting pressure on themselves to feel like they have to take the lead in these moments because they can't really train Paige, quote unquote, on that. And I think that's why Paige falls back on saying stuff like, "Oh, I learned this in one of Piper's quizzes," and da 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 da. Because I think it's information that's helping her, and she's really trying to show them like I can be a part of the team. Let me be part of the team.
Mm.
Um, and the only reason I keep thinking about that is because I completely agree that Phoebe was really wanting to ignore the hard part where Paige was just kind of acknowledging that this is an aspect of what's going on. Like you're saying that she would never give up her powers, but just today she was. She's not saying like let's sit down and have some, 3 hour long dialogue about it. She's like,
Right.
just be honest. Like you like
Right.
just
Let's be real in this situation.
be
Like,
real. Exactly.
let's not mope around. Let's not drag our well, they say in this country, I won't curse. They say let's not drag our tails.
Let's not drag our little pointy hats around.
Right.
Um, but like Jim has been saying though, Paige makes them see things.
Mhm.
And I think that's what Phoebe is struggling with the most. Is like, girl, I don't have time to deal with that internally right now. Like
Stop
y'all been
questioning
saying,
our system.
yeah, that's exactly it. You're questioning our system. And right now we don't have time to question the system because we have to save Piper. That's the priority. I just want to add that on to what y'all are saying because I think y'all are have made some excellent, excellent points. Um,
No, that rounds it out very well. It
very much
truly does.
so. Very, very much so. I do, just so we can kind of finish up our discussion on this. The end of the episode is something that we talked about in the in the rewatch. I am curious to know if you have thoughts on the end of the episode. Kind of up from them saving Pippi to the actual end where Lily orbs Pippi upstairs so they can, womp womp womp. Crystal, do you have any thoughts about that?
Um,
This
I did agree with you about how when they were saving her, it was Leo that said something to her, and she's just like, that's how she jumps up and like, okay, I'm good now.
Yeah.
I did agree with that part. And the end, it's kind of just like, I did like her coming downstairs and looking around. I do like that part. I think that that's, a relief. Like, okay, this is where I'm at. I'm not in that place. Um, but the other stuff with Leo orbiting her up, and even Phoebe and Cole going upstairs, it was kind of like, so this is how we end this kind of day, huh? Well, I don't know what to say about that.
Yes. Yes. That is such a good point. That is after this long day where Piper has been like mentally tortured to the point of almost giving up her powers to the point of insanity. Her Lily's first thought is, let's go have intercourse. And Piper's like, yeah, let's go.
And he,
What?
We got to practice making babies.
yeah.
It's like, you know what's funny? Like, Crystal, like, even just with this episode, like, but it makes me think, like, they never had a witchy ending to any of their
No.
days, like, or their victories. Some, like, when people died, and like, sometimes they'll like light a candle for, their a blessing or whatever, but it's like, y'all
Mhm.
not gonna sage, y'all not gonna,
Right.
Right.
Give thanks for keeping Piper in her
like
right
for
mind.
protection, because y'all
Yeah.
don't cast protection spells, so clearly somebody looking out for y'all.
Okay.
You know what though? That's a good point to bring up. Do y'all think that that is because of their disconnect from the Wiccan world? Because they do, like you said, they've done it sometimes, but it's not like they don't do it after a regular day. So do you think that they do it more as a tribute to a fallen witch because they know that like it means something in the Wiccan world, but to them it doesn't, so that's why they don't?
So
Hmm.
I think that it's more so, I think it all stems from how they were raised.
Hmm.
So I really do think it all stems from that. But
Hmm.
as we watch, I my opinion, because we don't really go into it in universe, but my opinion is that when there's a significant loss, or even like of a human, or a significant loss of in a battle, of a magical being, I think that's when it sits in a little more with them. But
Hmm.
I don't think that's a part of their everyday, even like, well, I'll go all the way up to like maybe like season 6, season 7, because you still barely see those type of things where they're connected to a spirituality of their practice, if you
Hmm.
will.
Hmm.
Like, there's not a lot of
You don't have.
acknowledgement until there's something so significant that they've lost.
Hmm.
It's not even like we get. I feel like they have done like a blessing ritual, or like, but
Well,
it's not even like they give thanks. They don't even give thanks unless the pages turn at a
Yeah.
certain point.
mhm.
So I really think it comes down to how they're raised, because Grams had came down and was like, well, did you do this ritual? Did you do that? Did you do
Hmm.
this? But I would have said, girl, did you teach me that? Did you teach me this? Did you teach me that? Because no, I didn't, because I didn't know they existed, because you stripped my powers at 4. So how would I know anything?
Hmm.
So it comes back down to that for
That
me.
makes a lot of sense. I think that that's why the first time that Piper has a baby, she wants the Wiccaning because it's just this beautiful ceremony and it's whatnot, and she's read about the good and the light that it can bring to them, and she wants her baby to be as protected as possible. But by the time that Chris gets there, she doesn't care anymore because she sees that it didn't help. You know what I mean? Like I think when I think when she knew, because we know Piper loves herself some magic, so I see what you're saying, because I feel like when Chris's Wiccaning gets there, the first time it had that magic and that wonder behind it, like, oh, this is one of those rituals that Grams was talking about. The
Right.
the matriarchs coming to bless my son and bathe him in light and whatever else. So by the time she has him, it's like, girl, y'all can bathe him in all the light you want to. It ain't gonna help. Like the Wiccan aspect of it, that magical aspect of it, that part that Grams told them was gonna be there, it's not there for her mentally anymore. So it doesn't hold any significance. And by
Nobody
the
helps
end,
her cultivate it.
huh?
Nobody helps Piper cultivate it.
Exactly. That's exactly it. And I think she wanted to be, like she had a certain vision of it at first. And then when it didn't work, she was like you said, nobody has helped her to see what it brings to them, what it
Yeah.
actually means, what it does. Because I mean, even with Wyatt, Grams don't want him to get a Wiccan because he's a boy. So I think Grams may even be disconnected from what the Wiccan is actually supposed to be and represent. And not to go back to talking about intention, but it makes me wonder if it maybe didn't fully have the impact it should have because he's a
It
boy.
was intended for a girl.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Wow.
And maybe they didn't put the full weight behind blessing him and being there for him the way that they normally would because he's a boy.
Right. They get this like, oh, we'll give him a blessing. Bless you. See you later.
Sorrows,
Like,
sorrows, prayers. you know.
because you know
But I
half
mean,
of them was from New England.
mm-hmm. But it makes me think that maybe that is why it didn't necessarily work. Because I mean, it may not have worked in the long run for Patty, because we see what happened there. But but she was also an adult, and it's not like it was something that was uncommon for a witch to die that young. Like that's kind of what they run that risk. Um. So yeah, I'm sorry. I know.
See,
I
I
know.
think no, I don't be sorry because I think that blessing, like the wickening that you speak of specifically, is more so about the like I was saying earlier, the spiritual connection to your craft. Because you could have a matriarchal blessing in any religion and any not religion, for lack of a better phrase. But it's like you said, intention and the connection to the spirit of what you're doing. And it wasn't given to her. It wasn't taught to her. It wasn't shown to her like, hey, this is the beauty of this connection to this specific thing, to these specific thing. Because we're talking about rituals, right?
Mm-hmm.
That
Mm.
just made me think of something too. They're very untraditional in their Wiccan. Like
Yes.
I noticed that throughout
Yes.
the show, they do touch on a lot of things that are Wiccan, but they don't dive into them like in the spiritual sense, like you were saying, Jim. Like they don't do that a lot.
And
It's
it's like,
that's probably why they make like some witches are like they're Wiccans or they're witches, but they're not magical. Like they separate that in the show.
yeah.
So I'm like, there's something there with that.
But the first episode, we're introduced with the Wiccan read.
Uh-huh. And she's
Exactly.
like, I got you in my wicked way. Yes.
No, it's the love and do no harm or something like that that they
Uh,
touch on, and that's the read. And or
not no.
love and do as thou wilt. That's what the words are. But yeah, I don't know. They lose the actual Wiccan stuff in it.
And I think that starts with Grams, because if we even look at that 70s episode, she talks about her coven, but we see her acting alone.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, you're right in the sense that they don't have the traditional Wiccan connection. And perhaps that's because of the egograms was then put into her connections to people in her family. Once she got hurt at whatever age she was in the 70s, she then manipulated every relationship she had because of what she was hurt by.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You
And
know,
then that affected being raised as a Wiccan.
Mm-hmm.
Because you can't be half a Wiccan, from my
Right.
understanding. It's like you can't be half a Christian. You either are one or you're not.
mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
You
It's
can
like
be, and even when you can just consider yourself a witch. I know I'm going off the tangent here, but it's like even when you consider yourself a witch, it's like it's a craft that you practice. It's not a title that you just have.
Yeah.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, that is true. That is very, very true. Can you just tell people, oh, I'm a witch? Like, baby, okay, so what do you do? Like what goes into it?
You fly on brooms or what? What's going on?
What do you mean?
And speaking of covens, the second episode that we watched today was Black as Coal. And I think that this is a very um important shift to make because in this episode, we are actually introduced to a coven and we see them have their own symbol. They have a necklace that is their symbol. Um and we see that it connects them and ties them together. Now, We also see that they are a little bit underutilized. We don't get much discussion about the coven. We don't even see them doing any kind of coven practices. We don't just see them doing anything. So, although we will get
Barely see
into
the
kind of like
coven.
the plot of the episode, I just would love to know while we're on this topic, um, what more would you like to have seen from the coven, or would you have liked to see more?
Anything.
Anything? Because I
Because
think
we barely saw one member.
we
It could have been like a phone call to see where they were. Something.
What's
Bring
the
something to the
system?
table. One of your members was just killed. What do you mean?
Right, give us a list of everybody's whereabouts.
how many
Okay.
coven members do you have?
Sally, start the phone tree.
And
Ooh.
you know, I
Okay,
will
I can
say,
answer in a serious way.
you know what? I would love to hear what you had to say. I'm gonna say this one quick thing about their coven that was interesting to me was how quick Phoebe pulled out. Maybe you've heard of us. I said, oh, now we pulling out the status of the charmed ones in this alleyway. What is going on? And the reason that was so significant to me was Phoebe clearly understands that they are important in the magical world, and it's just interesting to see how disconnected they are from magic, but that at the same time they have an innate understanding of it. And like even the way the witch kind of reacted, she was like she was starstruck, but then she was like, "Girl, I really don't even know what a charmed one is. I just thought you said something else." You know, like I like clearly she knew what it was, but it was just interesting because we've seen witches before that like were gagged at the fact that they were meeting the charmed ones. And then this lady kind of had a reaction like she kind of wanted to be like, what the hell is that? But then now also she was like, I've heard of y'all. But it was never a moment where she was like in awe of them. And I wonder if their coven was connected to magic as you know what I mean? So anyway, but Jim Anthony, go ahead, please. I just want to throw that point out there before I forgot.
Oh no, I'm glad you did. Like it all ties it all in together. What was she? She was wearing the triple moon crescent or the triple. Is it the triple
Triple
moon crescent?
crescent.
I
I
think
think
it's
it was
just
a
called the
triple
triple
crescent.
moon.
Or was it? I don't know. I think it was a triple crescent. Girl, I don't know.
It's a triple moon, but it's a triple moon goddess as well. It's like it represents the three faces, like Mother Maiden Crone.
Hmm.
So I it's a very common Wiccan symbol, which is so that was an amazing segue because let me find my words. It's a Wiccan symbol that's very traditional, right?
Hmm.
So when first of all, don't come up and grab my talisman, Phoebe. That's first and foremost. Like you came over here to snatch my chain off. Like I don't know you whether you're a charmed one or not. I don't know who you are, and you're over here you're grabbing my sacred talisman. That's very disrespectful.
That's true though.
And I appreciate because the charm always throws in a practicing witch in the episodes, like in the seasons. Like we always get a practicing witch, but we don't always get insight to the coven. So this would have been another perfect time to say, hey, my coven is meeting here. Can you come protect us? Can you teach us something that you know? How did you know I was a part of this coven?
Hmm.
Help us understand how to protect ourselves even
Yeah.
if we don't go any further past that. We don't You can't, again, charm introduces us to something and doesn't give us anything.
Hmm. Hmm.
Like we immediately went from her the witch, the practicing witch in the coven, to being Orb to Page's loft, to now we're dealing with Andrew's fiance Emma.
Hmm. Hmm.
So what happens to the witch in the coven?
Exactly. They throw the whole coven away, the whole coven storyline away, so that then we can focus on her, and then we can like. There's no focus in
Yeah,
that.
that was not a good way to make it about Cole.
It was not.
Oh
It,
man.
it was not at all, and we'll kind of get back into that because I definitely would love to know. Um, kind of where we all stand with that. But there is one thing I want to go back to. At the beginning of the episode, we see them in the midst of trying to find an innocent. And in the middle of trying to find, trying to find a demon, and in the middle of trying to find this demon, you know, Paige finds out who Babsar is. And Cole and Phoebe are in the alleyway, and Cole asks her to marry him in the heat of the moment. So I would just like to know if you have any kind of like specific thoughts on that. And Diamond, we'll start with you.
Not really. Not really a huge fan of that moment. I kind of felt like it was pretty pointless to add in. Because it didn't really add anything to the story. I think they could have added the whole getting married thing in at a different time and made it a better storyline. So I kind of hated that they added it in here. I think it would have made for an even better storyline to have it have been like instead of the episode with the ghost that possessed them that get them married. I think they could have just taken the proposal out of here and stuck it in that storyline and made it like he had just proposed earlier that day.
Yeah, that makes
And because at the end she says, "Yes, I will marry you," and they get engaged at the end of that episode. So it would have made way more sense to
sense.
have just not included it in this episode, waited it and made it be a part of that episode.
Yeah.
But they didn't because they wanted to add all of the reasons in between as to why Phoebe wasn't ready to get married to explain why she said no originally. That's like so like when I talked about how like I did it's not there are some things that are like critiques I have of it, stuff like that. That was so pointless, so unnecessary. Like it was in an effort to add personal drama
Hmm.
to the personal drama in between Cole and Phoebe, so that way when they resolved the sort of magic drama as well, we felt we could have a like a sort of personal emotional resolution as well. But it's like the magic drama was already so wrapped up in the fact that like Phoebe, you are in love with and in a relationship with someone who is a killer.
Hmm.
That's a more than enough emotional stuff. We don't need to add in the proposal.
Exactly.
So
I,
yeah, I didn't care for the proposal moment.
I see exactly where you're coming from. Because it felt like a lot for the beginning of the episode. That was the thing that
Hmm.
kind of was jarring to me. Um, was that we have that happen and we have Cole proposing, but then we also have Paige learning about who Balthazar is, but then them just kind of like skating past it until it comes back up and we need it for the episode. That was for me the intro to this episode was very strange because it felt a lot like they were just doing everything they were doing to set up the episode. Paige randomly learning about Balthazar, them having this adventure, and Phoebe. It was just I was like, okay. Even the way Piper kind of reacts, where she's like, yeah, now it's different because he's not that kind of a demon. This had a similar feel. This opening to the episode kind of had a similar feel to me in a very micro way to All Hell Breaks Loose, where it felt weird that we were opening the episode in the midst of things versus kind of like leading up to it. It didn't feel like there was a reason really to do it other than like you said just to set up what we needed for this episode. Um so in this when Phoebe gets back to the manor, Phoebe is completely, she doesn't want to talk about it. She's acting like it didn't happen. Cole is clearly hurt. And Piper realizes something's going on with Phoebe and is trying to get her to talk to her, but she just won't. So I would like to know, Jim Anthony, do you have any kind of, and I'm kind of skipping around just so we all get a chance to sort of say, what we want to say. Um, but Jim Anthony, do you have any thoughts on that, or do you have any thoughts on the opening as well? Because I forgot to ask you. Sorry.
No, it's okay. Excuse me. I would I was saying this in the rewatch earlier, is like how in different moments I was like, oh, Cole's so human here. He's so human here. I was like, oh wow, you could really see his emotions. And what I think that proposal, why they randomly threw it in there like that, is because they were setting us up for human Cole. That's what
Mm,
I got out of it after I watched it today again. I was like, oh, they're like, even I didn't think about the proposal until Diamond just said what she said. It makes me think like they were just trying to humanize him the entire episode to prepare us for a more human Cole, well, for human Cole.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I got from that. It's random, yeah. You shouldn't be asking me to get married if I'm not in my Gucci's best. So I don't understand that part either. It's like I'm over here covered in goop and gob. So like Phoebe's not that kind of girl. So I
Mm-hmm.
understand she fights demons in 6 inch heels. They only just picked up shoes because of proof. I mean sneakers because of proof.
Very that. Very that.
So it's not that I don't mind the proposal. It's just like this ain't the time for that, Cole. But
Mm-hmm.
Cole was showing his vulnerability and his humanity.
Mm-hmm.
That that what was that? That
Well, okay. So I want to bring up something that we did say we were going to talk about today in the panel, and I know Diamond wanted to have some input in this as well. Um and Crystal and Deanna, like, please feel free. Like, I'm only saying that because we had, Diamond had expressed that she had thoughts about it earlier. Um I fear that what you just said is correct. For me, my issue kind of with that is, I've told you before, I feel like the show works to excuse Coleridge a lot from what he has done. And this episode is no different to me. This episode, I think the fact that because I absolutely agree that they are trying to humanize him. And kind of
mm-hmm.
my problem innately with that is, like I said before, it's not Cole. It feels like when people say Cole had his what in the hell am I trying to say? His redemption. I feel like things like this is why Cole didn't really get a redemption because the show just wanted to tell us, like, no, Cole is human. Cole is good. See? Versus letting him work through those things,
Right.
versus letting him experience those things and letting him really reconcile with what he's done. It felt like the show was so focused on getting to this place where Cole and Phoebe, especially I think as they became a much more popular couple, I feel like Cole, I really don't want to say I don't really want to say gets passes. I really want to say
No, they made him good. He didn't
they
become
make,
good.
yeah, that's exactly, they kept making him good,
Mm-hmm.
and this felt like that final hammer in our face that, look, God damn it, Cole is good, okay? And you have them working overtime trying to separate Cole and Bebza, and then you have this external factor in Emma where it's like she is representative of his past, and we're not supposed to like her because she's loud and because she's angry and because she's upset at what happened, but she can't be mad at him because that was his past, and it wasn't
Right.
even him, it was Balthazar. It wasn't Cole. And again, I'm not saying that that is what Cole is trying to tell people. The story is I feel like that's what the story is doing with us, and it just makes it not super enjoyable to watch, somewhat, from like a storytelling perspective for me, because although I like the episode, I think the episode is good. The story giving Cole another way of just being good, and then you have him kind of like having the puppy dog, if I turn into Balthazar, I'm gonna have to go all in, and I'm going to have to really tap into my evil side to vanquish this demon. What? Like, we've seen Cole throw energy balls at demons all the time and vanquish them. Like, what are you talking about? It just it
That adds to your point, though, like of having an inverted version of Balthazar there to show us that Cole is good.
Yes, exactly. And his powers don't work on him. He, in order to vanquish this evil that is really representative of who he was, because Sykes going the whole episode and basically saying, "Oh, I'm playing out of your playbook," and that's how Cole would know what Sykes is gonna do because he's playing out of his playbook. Um, the fact that he can't just throw an energy ball at him and vanquish him, and he has to really reach into his demonic half. It was just very strange. It felt unnecessary because again, it just then you have him telling Phoebe, if I lose control, then use the potion. It just felt very shallow. It just felt very shallow to me.
It felt cheap.
It felt very cheap for
Yeah.
me. And it falls
See,
flat.
I'm not delusional.
Yo, you're not. You're not. I mean, no, you're not most of the time. I know that 60, I know that 54% of the time. I know 54% of the time you're not delusional.
54. I'll take it when it comes to Cole. I'll take it,
Mhm.
but I'll take it.
But no, I know I spent a little time over explaining that, but I really wanted to make sure I explained like why it bothers me because we didn't fully get a chance to go into it earlier. And kind of my perspective on the storyline and how it culminates. And that was my other thing was I feel like it culminates in this episode because I feel like they've done it so much since they decided that he was going to be good and be with Phoebe that this episode it just feels like a real slam in the face. And when you brought that up about the coven earlier, it made me realize like we do have a lot going on. We have this ex-fiance who is directly tied to indirectly tied to Cole, but then you also have the coven who's not tied to Cole, but they're tied to like this version of Cole that's not. Then you have Sykes, who again is directly slash indirectly tied to him because he's like, I was never your mentor, and he says, in reputation, you were. What? What are you? It felt very
We have to put these pieces here, and we'll make them fit.
and make them fit, and it feels like the video games are what's making the kids angry and making them violent. It felt like that because for him to say reputation was just like that's how bad Cole was that his reputation turned him into a killer. And it's like, okay, what? And that's what I mean when it just felt very cheap to me. It felt very, very um not unnecessary,
Let's
but
jump
it felt
over the
very
topic of the day.
convoluted. It felt so convoluted in certain ways that it truly did not feel. It feels like we lost Cole in the episode, if I'm being 100% honest. Because we have the stuff with the Coven going on, we have the stuff with Emma going on, we have the stuff with Sykes going on, and it feels like Cole is just kind of taking the back seat until the end when we can all say, "Oh, he's human now."
My
Like,
baby.
so that's just kind of how I see that. Diamond, I know you said that you had thoughts about that, so I would love to hear them.
Yeah. I do. I have thoughts. Because I don't see Emma in the same way that you see Emma as far as, or at least as far as you're saying the show was trying to present Emma. I see it very differently. I also see the Sykes situation as not completely differently, but not this in the same way. And I don't really feel like Cole was taking a back seat. I feel like Cole was being battered from both sides by two completely, like the two different aspects of himself in all the ways. And I don't think that this episode, I differentiate between the sisters justifying Cole and trying to humanize Cole and trying to say that Cole is just good now. I separate that out from the show doing it or from the story doing it. Because to me, if the story was trying to say that Cole is good and Cole's not a bad guy, then Cole wouldn't constantly being getting slapped in the face with the fact that he's a murderer. Like the story is constantly slapping Cole in the face with you are evil, you are a bad guy, you did bad things, you murdered people. The story's constantly doing that, and the sisters are always trying to brush it away. You're not the guy you were, and I don't take it that way because the sisters saying something isn't in my opinion, the same way as the story saying something. So that's how I just view it a little bit differently in that regard. And I think for me, I guess it's because like I'm taking Cole's full story arc into consideration and his full story arc is Cole constantly suffering and never achieving his goals and never getting what he desires because Cole never reconciles with his past. He never every opportunity that he's ever has to confront it and deal with it. If it's not him brushing it away, then it's Phoebe brushing it away. So he never gets a chance to reconcile with his actual past. And because he never gets a chance to reconcile with it, Cole never gets to have a good life. Yeah, a little small, but little small moments, little pockets, but he never gets to have a good life. He never gets to achieve his goals. And he ultimately succumbs to a fate worse than death, being trapped in between realms. So I'm taking his whole story arc into consideration. So that's maybe why I view it a little bit differently, because I view this as sort of the beginning of when Cole really could have. I view Cole being turned into a human. So because I wrote 2 pages of notes.
Oh my.
I wrote 2 pages of notes. And one of the things I wrote is that Cole having to confront Psyche is Cole is being confronted with the fact that he cannot be good or be focused or move forward with his life with his demonic half. He cannot get new results from old ways. So like everybody's been under this false delusion that Cole can be half demon and still be good. And that is just not true. And confronting Sykes and having to deal with, look, I know you and I know you because you're evil. And as long as you have that half of you that makes you evil, and that's when I see it him saying like, oh, I can't use my powers. I can't just throw an energy ball at him. I have to turn evil, like turn into Balthazar, let Balthazar take me over to be able to fight him. And when I'm Balthazar, I might want to kill you, Phoebe, because that is an evil part of me that I don't have control over. And but when I'm Cole, I would never want to kill you. So I can't keep moving forward as if I'm good when I have an evil part of me who would kill you if given the opportunity attached to me. So that's how I see it. And like, I don't think you're wrong for viewing it the way that you view it at all. And if I were maybe like less like open to the idea of like the story not nicifying Cole, I feel like, because I mean, I can definitely see where you're coming from with it 100%. I don't by any means think that the story does gloss over a lot of stuff, but I do think that that's the reason why Cole never get like, because you said it yourself, Cole never gets a redemption, and it's because Cole never earned a redemption, and he doesn't. He never gets a redemption, and the story never gives him a redemption. Even if, like, for a small moment, it seems like he's getting a redemption arc, it gets snatched away from him because Cole never earned one, so he's never gonna get one.
Yeah. Yeah. And see, to me, a lot of the reason that I think, but I've said a million times, I genuinely think Charmed is one of those shows where if you're evil, you just can't have a good ending. And to me, that's kind of the perspective that I look at is I think they work so hard. Now, the reason that I say for me that the story will tell us that Cole is good versus just the sisters telling us is because I get where you're coming from. For me, I think it's things like Cole killed somebody, but he was under a spell, and it's not just the Phoebe operating under the delusion that he was under a spell. It's the fact that we then have Raynor like pulling the strings, so to speak. So it feels like in that situation, even though that may not be fully what happened, it feels like what the story is trying to tell us is like Cole did it, but it's because he was pushed to the edge. And then with this episode in particular, it's like the way it's written with him not really reflecting and not it doesn't feel like he ever has to. And it's more and I think it's a little deeper to me than just not deeper, that's not what I meant. I think it's different than just the sisters don't give him the chance to. I really think that the story works over time to make sure that they bring it up so that they can say that they brought it up so that then when they skate past it, it's like, but see, we brought it up. Like, even when you go back to the Harpies, you have Phoebe clearly knowing that the Harpies are probably going to tear his head up when they get there. Not the Harpies, the Furies, Jesus. The Furies are clearly going to tear his head up when they get there because he's an evil person that has done evil things, even though she tells him he's not the person that's done those things anymore. And so when they do, and he falls to the ground and he's holding his head and he's just screaming, it's like, well, yeah, because you've done things that would warrant that. And then Piper comes in and it immediately gets cut off and he is no longer a part of the story of that particular scene. Like he is no longer a part of it. The story pulls him out of it and now we shift our attention. And On the surface level, it's like, well, yeah, Galen, duh, because the story is about the sisters. But I think that's where the kind of trap almost falls in, is that it when they shift the focus, it makes sense because it's like, well, yeah, it's not about them. It's not about him, it's about them. So with this story in particular, it's like now you got Phoebe trying to convince her, but then they also have to go out and find Sykes. And then they also have to go help the coven. And they have to try to figure out what to do with this damn baby that Paige went and bought. So there's always something to kind of shift the focus away from Cole to where he doesn't fully have to in the story be faced with these things. And so that's a lot of what I mean when I say there's putting it off. And with Emma specifically, because I really want to go into her, um I said earlier, and I stand by this, that she feels like a character that could have been his cousin, it could have been his sister, it could have been his brother, it could have been an uncle, it could have been his mama, his dad, it could have been someone who had a close tie to him because it didn't feel like, and not every single character that comes across our screen has to be an A grade character. You know what I mean? And I'm not saying she was a bad one. I am saying that they gave her attributes that I feel like were viewed negatively so that we could see Cole in a much more positive light. And kind of going back to what Jim Anthony was saying earlier, like humanizing him so that when the time did come, we could be like, that's not Cole. Cole loves Phoebe. He wouldn't do anything like that. And I feel like they set stuff up like that in the same way that I feel like they use Natalie to kind of boost up Leo. Whether that was the intention or not necessarily, that's what I feel like ended up happening. Is we have this very unlikable, coincidentally, redhead woman, um, that's here and she's feisty and she's going against them and she's really questioning how things run and she's questioning their morality and she's questioning this and she's questioning that, where then you have on the other side this person who's just, you have this man who's like, you have in Blinded by the White Light, you have Leo who just, I just want you guys to be safe, okay, man, you know, I just want you guys to follow your heart. And then here you have Cole who needs to be protected because he's not that demon anymore, he's not that person, he has paid for what he has done because he has devoted himself to doing good. So you're just running around like a chicken with its head cut off for no reason because he's not even that person. um, and to me, I that's what I mean when I say like her character was meant to be their way of saying we've addressed again that he is a murderer. We have brought it back up. We are throwing it back at you. We are putting it out here, and then we moving on. Because when old girl goes to put the knife, pick up the knife at the end, and Phoebe yells, no, like as loud as she possibly can, it was like this deep down growl, like, girl, don't you hurt him. He's a human now. And I don't think, I think that by having outside visuals, they are working to make us separate Cole from blah blah when they don't ever, the story, not just the sisters but the actual story itself, never gives him a chance to reconcile with that before they just take it away themselves. And it's like, all right, we're done with that now, you know. And it feels like not whitewashing, I wouldn't call it whitewashing, but I do feel like it's their way of, I think they made an attempt to move him into this next era of being human. And that's why, like, looking at it from an isolated standpoint, because like if you look at the whole story, of course you can kind of pick the pieces apart. But I'm looking at it from the perspective of, I'm watching this episode and then the set of episodes that have led up to this, and that story is so far removed from kind of what we get that you can see why he pivots so hard, because they didn't actually know what to do with his character at a certain point. To me, they just had him going through the motions, had people protecting him. They kept giving excuses. this happened, that happened. Oh, well, he couldn't control this. He wasn't that person. He wasn't that demon. He wasn't. And so by the end of it, like here in Black is Cole, Cole almost doesn't have a personality to me because he's everything that the story has done has been to separate him from Balthazar to the point where Cole as a human, and I know that that's probably supposed to be part of it, is that he doesn't necessarily have an identity as a human, but because they've worked so hard to tell us that Cole is not evil, Cole is not evil. It was Balthazar. It was Balthazar. It was Balthazar. They had a blank character that they didn't know what to do with, and then I feel like they went back. And some of it is supposed to be that, he doesn't know what else to do. He doesn't know what else to be. He doesn't know what else to X, Y, and Z. But I think a lot of that is because they didn't set him up to be able to deal with the things that he had done so that when he does become a human, he can go into being a lawyer again so that he can actually help people this time, and we see him putting that work in, or he can decide that he wants to go do some other thing because Cole has a human identity because they set him up with one. Now could he use it? That's a different story. That's kind of a murky area. But my point here is they could have gone into so many different personality types in so many different areas of career and so many different things that he wants to do in the community and who he wants to be as a person had they given him the chance to actually deal. They could have had him working in prisons with people to help rehabilitate them in some kind of way. He could have become a defense attorney for them. He could have done something of that nature had they taken the time for him to say, I did this when I was evil, and this is how I got through it, and this is how I moved past it. Because they give him the crutch of Phoebe because Phoebe is the one who, basically is making him good, quote unquote. Like Sykes even says it when he's like, I wonder if you'll have the same effect on me. We're rooting it in Phoebe now. Now Phoebe is the one who made him good. And it doesn't feel like Cole ever makes a choice to be good because the story doesn't give him the chance because Phoebe's love is special and it has changed him. It was always a spell put on him from somewhere. There's always a potion that can vanquish him if he gets too out of hand. He has to constantly shimmer around so that he can avoid detection from these bounty hunters. And by the end of it, when his powers are gone, he looks her in the face and says, is this what we asked for? Well, yeah. Well, yes. It literally is. So to me, I know I just did a lot of unpacking and talking, and I'm so sorry about that. To me, that's why this particular episode is wonky, but in a way that they've been doing this whole time. Which is why I think they eventually just make Cole into the villain. And they just say, you know what? No. Mm-mm. We tried to go the good route with you, so we're just gonna make you the bad guy now.
You know what's interesting? Excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
That this episode feels exactly like, and I didn't care for this episode I'm about to mention either necessarily. This feels exactly like that. I forget the name of it. That episode with the Brotherhood taking Cole back and forth to hell.
Mm-hmm.
Like that when he killed the witch, like still doesn't change the fact that I killed the witch.
Mm-hmm.
Like this reminds me of all of that where they had, and that brings me to my point of your point saying that they could have easily went down this route that they had open already. Cole was a what, ADA?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? It's just like he could have easily went towards his human side in that route just as soon as he came back up from the earth, if that's what they really wanted to do with him.
Yeah.
Or if that's what he really wanted to do if we're staying in universe. But it's like it's frustrating to me, this episode and the way they handle Cole, because it does, to me, it doesn't necessarily make sense, which is why I feel like at the end of the episode, he's like, wait, well, is this what we wanted? Because I feel like he was telling Phoebe, and maybe I need to go rewatch it because I don't remember. I know he said the power tripping potion, but I don't remember because I remember the conversation that Diamond brought. Diamond was like, "No, that's the power stripping potion, not the vanquishing potion." We were like, "Oh yeah, I forgot about
Yeah.
that."
Because he was
So
hard to
I'm
get the
wondering, like, did
vanquish.
you want to be vanquished?
Yeah, that is a great point. I'm so glad you brought that up because that's definitely what I was thinking. I think Cole was low key telling her like it just needs to be over. You know what I mean? Like I'm like I'm just ready for it to be done. And I
It's been
almost feel
180
like that was
years.
I almost feel like that was his way of being like, girl, I can't keep doing this. This is too much.
Like
You
this is not
know?
what I told you to do.
Mhm.
I agree with that. I agree with that so much
But
because
that's
he
why Emma
did look
pissed me off.
disappointed.
What'd you say, Krista?
I was like, I agree with that too. I think that's what he wanted was the vanquishing potion because he did look really disappointed when it was just the power stripping. He was
Hmm.
just like, wow, okay.
Like even when he was burning his, like when Balthazar was burning away from Cole, he just looked like, damn, this isn't enough.
Mm.
Like seriously, he looked like he was so disappointed. Like Crystal was saying, he just looked like this isn't me burning completely.
Right.
Why
So,
don't
but
I
that's
feel
what also
flesh?
makes me sad because for me, I love Cole with power.
Yeah.
That's the version of Cole I love. Human Cole, I can do without. Honestly, truly, like I could deal without him because it's not Phoebe and Cole that makes it for me. But this isn't about me right now. This is about this is
Now
about
I want Balthazar.
Right.
yes. I
You think she made him get
want
there in the bedroom
Oh,
sometimes?
you know she did. Oh, you know
Oh,
she did. And
oh
she'd be
my
stupid if
god.
she didn't, because I know that bitch. Oh, oh,
she's
oh,
stupid if
oh.
she did it.
She is.
I did not mean to say that.
Because Balthazar was really swaggy. Like he just had an air about
Mm.
That part. He was in
Cole.
control,
Cole
you
was
know,
bad,
he
but
knew he had power.
He
exactly.
throw he throw
Mhm.
Balthazar his worth.
energy. He throw an energy ball at you, and you thinking.
You duck and then you start smiling.
You be like, oh, you love me, huh?
That scorch mark, that almost went through the wall. Damn,
Put them old
man.
Pennywise teeth. Bring them old Pennywise teeth over here.
You'll float too.
Oh.
But no, that's a very good point. That Cole, especially, I think he knew that if he went full Balthazar, that he wouldn't be able to come back. I think he really was like, at that point, just take it out. Take me out. Take me out. I'm done. Because here's the thing. Piper, the potion that Piper had was for Sykes. So we don't even know if that would work. But Piper was ready to throw it though. Piper was very ready. Piper said, girl, let's go. She said, and
Yeah,
then
she even had her hands up ready to blast them. She was like, "Don't make me do this."
no, she had that potion up. And even Paige was like, throw the potion. Baby, all Paige needed to hear was he done killed somebody. And she was
Oh
ready.
yes. I love that too about this episode because this is where Paige starts looking at Cole a little because she knew he was a demon, but she didn't know he was that kind of
Yeah.
demon.
Yeah, she was like,
So
ooh. She was
And
like,
she
okay.
was asking him last episode too, or yesterday's episode. She was like, "Listen, kill any kill any witches lately."
I love how kind of like direct but passive aggressive she is at the same time.
mhm.
Like
And
that.
I love what we see in the upcoming episodes and seasons with their
Yeah.
relationship too.
Hmm.
Mhm.
And I'm gonna say this, and we'll kind of get back on track because I know I've kind of gotten us on track, but I like the fact, although I hate the way that she found out that he was Balthazar, I like the fact that they didn't just have her come in and dislike him for no reason.
Yeah.
Because I think they could have easily just had her be like, I don't know, I get a funny feeling about him, and then that be it. But we see that they're like, as she's learning what he is, who he is, she's like, this ain't right. And again, I think it plays back into that aspect of Paige being the quote unquote outsider. Like, she's not been here to kind of validate, have, these thoughts that they've been having, and that he's okay and he's good and he's whatever. Like, she comes in knowing him as a demon, and then finding out that he is Balthazar, like, really cements it for her. And so I just like that there's a progression, even though it's fairly quick, there's a progression of her starting to dislike him. and then eventually hate him.
A phrase comes to mind after you express that, is that she is the x that you have to, or the number that you have to plug in for x to solve the equation. And they're used to just having y equals mx plus b. They don't want to solve the equation, but she is the outlet. Well, I don't want to say outlet. I'm forgetting my terms, but she's the number you have to put in to solve the equation.
Mm-hmm. She
She
absolutely,
being Paige.
she absolutely is.
You
She,
get what I'm saying? Like in reference to what you're saying?
oh yeah, no, I
Okay.
get it. I absolutely get it because they have such this flow on how they see him, and they've had time to kind of like play into Phoebe's delusion, let that be their baseline, and then Paige comes in and it's like, okay, now what number we got to put into this? Because this
Right, like, but
equation,
so y'all saying 1 plus 2 is what now?
1 plus 1 is 2, and 2 plus 2 is 10. Then what is this?
Right, then what the fuck
Like
is
she's just like, I don't understand what any of this is. And I think that's another thing because like when you said before that Paige makes them think. I think Paige also makes them acknowledge, which is why they don't answer her directly a lot. Like when she asks questions, they'll just be like, "We'll tell you later," or "It doesn't matter," or "Let's just focus on the innocent." They never answer her question because they realize how crazy it sounds to say out loud.
Hmm.
Yeah. If she makes them, you know what's even better than think, she makes them reflect.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, oh well, this well, let's move on because that doesn't make any sense. So
And it puts them in a position where low key, I'm not trying to throw shade at my baby at all. Okay. I feel like it also puts them in a predicament where they don't want to acknowledge that Prue let something go on. And what I mean by that is they hold her in such high regard and such high esteem. Like she just had everything figured out and she had an iron grip on everything and da 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 blah 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 blah. And I think if they acknowledge that things are crazy to the point where someone would have to come in and question it, then they'd have to say like, "Oh, well, Prue didn't exactly have the iron grip that we've been saying she does. Now does she?" Hmm. What thought process on
and
that? What do y'all think
and
about
is
that?
that
Do y'all agree with that? Or
it could be true because that makes them then question their big sister,
mm-hmm.
and they don't want to do that.
Mm-hmm. Does anyone else have any thoughts on that? I would just love to know.
I think I missed the last part of what the question was.
Um, no, I was just saying that I think that Paige questioning things would make them have to acknowledge that Prue didn't have the iron grip on things that they make it seem like she has. And maybe that's another reason they don't want to acknowledge her asking questions sometimes.
That's interesting.
Oh,
Yeah, I could see that. No, no, not
I know
not
I'm
that
messing with
way.
you. I'm messing with
Don't do that.
you. I'm
But
messing.
yeah, I never thought of that.
Um, well, Diamond, what other thoughts did you have about Black is Cold? Because I know you said you got some notes, so I would just love to kind of hear your perspective on what you were thinking.
Yeah, let me see. I Oh yeah, so for me, I think that like when you're juxtaposing Natalie to Emma a lot and saying kind of making that comparison
Mhm.
to the fact that they're both redheads and kind of trying to say they were trying to serve the same purpose and function, I actually feel like it's actually the opposite. Like even though they do have red hair, if we want to have that same sort of comparison of saying that like they both have red hair, so they like so we want you to think of them in conjunction with each other. I think that they were very selective with who they picked to be Emma for the very specific fact that, and I'm going to be just straight, like just straightforward and not try to mince my words. Natalie was a plus size, not very well made up, not very well dressed, brass, aggressive woman. And Emma is this petite, pretty, almost dressed sort of conservative with her long skirt and her little sweater. And while she was very strong with how she spoke, she was very soft-spoken and very like minimized. She wasn't in anybody's face aside from Cole's when she threw that knife. Everything that she did seemed very structured and controlled as opposed to lashing out everywhere. Like now, and I know that she was very angry, but even her anger was very subdued as to what the like women on the show, how big and loud and aggressive their anger has been. Emma's was much more subdued. And I think they were specifically doing that because they were trying to present her as a re even though she was strong and steadfast and very grounded in what her beliefs and her goals were, and her goal was ultimately something that was a ultimate negative because revenge is always going to be an ultimate negative. I think the story tried to portray her in a more favorable light because at the end of the day, Emma got to achieve her goal, which was to kill the demon that killed her fiance. And earlier you had said that Emma is indirectly tied to Cole. And I kind of disagree with that because Cole slaughtered her fiance in front of her. That to me is a direct, because try to come slaughter my husband in front of me and see if I don't hunt you down for the rest of your life. Like I'm not like, so to me, I feel like Emma is meant to sort of embody how survivors' grief, guilt can sort of like consume you in a way that, because I don't feel that they presented her in any sort of a manic way. I feel like even though she did have very big, she was very demonstrative and I am doing this. She wasn't even trying to tell the sisters, like, don't do what you're doing. They were the ones spending all of their time and energy trying to talk her out of doing what she was going to do because it was going to get her killed. Whereas like they present Phoebe, Prue, Piper, and Paige all at different times, questioning people, telling them they're wrong about stuff. And so I feel like if that's how the show wanted to present women, as when women are angry or confident or strong in how they are, or maybe even being unreasonable at times, then that's a negative. I feel like they present all of the sisters in that same way, and they don't necessarily present them in a negative way. So I can kind of see it because yes, usually women that are presented that way are being portrayed in a negative way, but they also present the sisters in strong, positive ways in that same way. And so that's how I see it because I feel like they would have gone for someone who was not. I'm gonna be straight honest. I think if Charmed really wanted her to be presented as evil, they would have picked somebody who wasn't as pretty. And I'm just trying to be, because I oftentimes you see that with some of the women that they try to present as not being the good women. You can see that sometimes they try to present them as a little bit more either sexy, seductress, right? Or they try to present them as like kind of like not frumpy, but I don't know exactly how I'm trying to phrase it, but just the opposite of what
Yeah.
they when they present the seductress evil, right? And so that's how I see Emma, because to me I feel like if the story similar to Natalie, right? The story wanted you to see that the story like Natalie came in very dislikable, and as the sisters presented off as disliking her, and then we as the audience went along on a journey with the sisters to grow to appreciate her even if we weren't going to outright like her. And I think the way they were okay with doing that because the story was going to kill her. Natalie ultimately achieved her goal because they defeated, what was his name?
Sykes.
Sykes. No, not Sykes. No,
No, oh,
Natalie.
Ames. Ames. Sorry.
Ames, yes, yeah. Ames. They ultimately defeated Ames, but her goal was not to get killed, and her plan did not work. So I feel like, but with Emma, the story allowed Emma to achieve her goal, which was to kill the demon that killed her fiance, which we're saying was Balthazar. And I think that moment, to me, I view that moment like, you're focused on Phoebe in that moment when Emma picks on up the thing, which, obviously that makes sense because she's the main character, right? I was so focused on Emma in that moment of like, Emma is still so consumed by her rage and anger and desire for revenge that she is gonna go kill this man, right? And and then Phoebe stops her, and in my mind, it was a moment of them saying she had to put her desire for revenge down, even though in Emma's mind, Cole and Balthazar are the same thing. She had to put that aside. She was able to achieve her goal, which was the demon is gone, even though Emma still views the man as a part of that. She was able to put that aside and leave by putting down the knife and going, right? Because she could have tried to fight them and been like, no, and thrown that knife in the back of Cole's head, right in his bald spot. So it's like she could have tried it, but she was willing to put it down. And I think that was a message of saying she achieved her goals, and we can have hope as the audience that she moved on because she was willing to put that knife down and let go of her desire for ultimate revenge and move on. Because ultimately, you seeking out revenge ultimately is going to destroy you. And that's what the sisters were trying to say the whole time. You're going to get killed if you keep going on this mission. And so that's how I view Emma. But I can't obviously I can't say you're wrong because, the traits that you talk about are traits that usually are attached to women in order to say they're not, you shouldn't like this woman. But I mean, like, just she was so soft spoken. Like, that is such a big thing to me. Like, she was strong in her words, but she was so soft spoken. And I feel like they would have made her scream a lot more, yell at everybody a lot more. But she was like, yeah, she was angry, but she wasn't losing her mind with anger. And I think that's how they would have portrayed her if they wanted us to really just not like her and think she was unreasonable. Because even when Phoebe hunted her down, and she was like, if she was completely unreasonable, she wouldn't have stood there and talked to Phoebe and let Phoebe explain herself. But she did. She stood there and let Phoebe explain herself. And then she was like, are you kidding me? Like, you're lying to yourself. You're being unreasonable. And she tried to hold a mirror up to Phoebe and make her realize you're being delusional. But Phoebe just turned away from it as quick as she could and went back to, you have to stop or you're going to get yourself killed. And so that's kind of, I don't see her as being unreasonable because to me, an unreasonable person wouldn't have stood there and let Phoebe explain herself. She would have just been cutting her off, telling her she was crazy, yelling at her, calling her all kinds of names. So that's how I view Emma. And that's why I don't view them as trying to I do view them as kind of putting them against each other, but I view it more as like, while Emma is not right for having this desire for revenge, Emma is not an evil person, and Cole is evil. And you see how Cole, like, Emma cannot, she is hunting down a demon when she doesn't even have powers to do this. And Cole can't even really truly remember if he did kill this man. He assumes he did because the athame was his. Like, that to me is such a juxtaposition that this woman is not evil. She is good in her heart, but her righteous mission, or she's not on a righteous mission. Whereas Cole is so evil he can't even remember the amount of people he's killed. And so that's kind of why I see them as putting them against each other and showing how different they are and showing that, see, Emma was able to let go of it herself, whereas Cole literally had to have the evil stripped out of him before he was willing to let it go. Because like y'all both said, he wanted to be vanquished before he ever mentioned a stripping potion again.
Yeah. Yeah, because he just wanted it to be done. You know what's interesting about that though is it almost makes me feel it almost makes me feel even more like they actually could have done something like they did with Emma with Cole because in listening to what you're saying, because I agree with it. First off, I do want to say too, when I compare her to Natalie, I'm not like trying to compare them directly. I was kind of speaking more loosely, like the characteristics that they had. I was just kind of bringing up the red hair just to bring up the red hair. That didn't, necessarily have it.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was more of just me saying that they will make characters act a certain way in the moment. But I do actually have another thought about that, but I want to go back to this first. Um because it feels like we watch if so from even because from that perspective we're watching Emma go on this journey of accepting that she can't kill him because now he's human, going on this journey of now she has to let it go because that demon is dead. And what I really feel about that in the moment, and I may absolutely change my mind, um yeah, in a couple of days or whatever, but in the moment what that really makes me think is how unfair that is for her, that Cole, from her perspective, that Cole
Mhm.
gets to do this, and because the magic is now stripped from him, he is absolved, and she has to let go of what happened. She doesn't get a chance to actually get revenge because the demon is quote unquote dead. Because here's the thing is, while Balthazar does not exist anymore, Cole still does. And that gray area of trying to strip the two of them apart from each other is fine and dandy, working from him, but it makes it even more sad now that we have this person who, like you said, has a direct tie to him and what he's done, and she just has to let it go.
Yeah, no,
Because
it's not fair. It's not fair at all.
no, and that's kind of my big issue, I think, with it. Is like you give us this person who her fiance was killed by him, like you said, in front of her. And she finally gets the opportunity to stand there and take him out. Yes, she threw that potion. She probably thought it was a vanquishing potion. So she was she was trying to get him up out of
She probably did. No, she
here.
probably did.
Yeah, she was trying to kill him.
She
And
actually did not care what it was.
she didn't. It could have been something that would turn him into a bunny rabbit, and she would not have cared. She would have just been like, let's go ahead.
She would have had rabbit for dinner.
That part. That wasn't chicken we had for dinner. Toots. Um, if anybody's ever seen Mama's Family, that's a Mama's Family. But anyway, um, but it but I think that's kind of representative of what I mean when I say Cole just gets away with it, quote unquote, kind of,
Yeah,
for lack of a better term, because now she has to just not anymore. Like this thing that has been fueling her, raging her, Cole just gets to, because she doesn't know what the hell Cole is gonna do tomorrow, because she's out of their
yeah,
life. But from her perspective, it's just like, okay, so now I just gotta go home. Now I just have to go because it's over, and she would have had to deal with that whether Cole was stripped of his powers or whether he was vanquished, whatever the case may be. She was going to have to deal with what tomorrow brought her. But now she has to live with it from this perspective that, okay, well, now he got a woman that's calling him his fiance. Now he got a woman that's protecting him at all costs. He has somebody that he's willing to give up everything for. And he took the person that I felt that towards, and I watched him turn from that person. Yeah, no, she did. I watched him turn from this human man into this demon, and now they're just telling me that he's not that. And it that's the perfect example of what I mean when I say like it's just not, I think, handled well in that specific regard. And as far as she goes, I think there is, because I did want to double back, and I wanted to say I see exactly what you mean about like Natalie being much more abrasive than Emma was. I almost wonder if that was intentional because Cole is a main character. And so I'm trying to think of where I'm trying to go with that. Is like, because again, I still do feel like they characterized her as being abrasive, not as abrasive as Natalie, but still abrasive all the same. But if that was in a way because like, okay, she's just a regular person that's hurting. Do you know what like I feel like they tried to humanize her so they could humanize Cole. And I'm not necessarily trying to tie her. Well, I mean, I guess I am actually tying her character to him because she was created for that story. It feels like, okay, she's this rage fueled regular person. And so Cole is just a regular person who's also rage fueled because of the demon in him, but he's suppressing it. And so now that she's gotten rid of that part of him, she can get rid of that part of herself and she can go back to being a nice, gentle human. I know that doesn't necessarily make all the sense in the world, but the reason that I'm thinking that in like after hearing what you were saying was just because this show, they just have reasons to do the things that they do because they don't necessarily have like the full depth to write like a good story. So everything kind of ties back to like how we're supposed to perceive it. So that's just my personal little take. Again, I in a couple of days I might absolutely have a different opinion of it. Um, but just hearing what you were saying, because I really was listening to the things that you were saying in that perspective and that viewpoint, and and I see where you're coming from. I absolutely do. I absolutely see where you're coming from, and I think that I get it. It's just with them, they just when they decide that they're gonna, it's so hard to separate the character sometimes from like the actual what the show is trying to tell us because the sisters, I do think, as writing as characters have their own minds, but the story sometimes just backs up their delusion, and sometimes it doesn't. And then sometimes we're supposed to see two or three different things. And I think this is a good thing to kind of like have all these different angles of the story. That was a lot. Sorry. So, well, so then, end of the episode, as we've discussed before, Cole gets, the blah 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 taken out of him, and he is now just a regular human man. So how do we all feel about Cole being just a human now? Crystal, would you like to start us off with that?
I don't know. It's conflicting because I remember I basically would feel like he that's great because
Hmm.
that's how I felt just watching the show. But it's also like, does that absolve him of everything that he did before? Like,
Right.
I don't know.
Good point. Good point. Diamond, what do you think about it?
Um, I agree. I don't think it absolves. I agree with Gunnar what Crystal says, except for I don't think it absolves Cole. I don't. But I do think that, and if this, story had treated it correctly, this is, in my opinion, is the beginning of when Cole could have gone on a redemption arc. I
Mm,
don't see a world in which, like, yeah, like I love Cole with powers too, because I mean, shimmering and throwing energy balls is great. But there's no world in which Phoebe as a witch, a charmed one, and Cole as a half demon works. There's no world in which it works. And so if Phoebe and Cole were ever going to work out, it was going to be with Cole as a human. And if Cole could have managed to keep his ish together for long enough, he would have been able to really work out how to be a human and could have gone on a redemption path of being able to, you like you said, maybe find some way of working with people who are in the just, because he tried to get that job at the social work office and it didn't work out and stuff like that with legal aid. So it's like he could have found a way. He then was going to go be a cop with Daryl. Not really, but like, so he wanted to be able to do good and be proactive, and maybe he could have found his way into doing that as a human and finding a way to actually make amends for, or at least begin to make amends, because I don't think he really could have, because it'd been hundreds of years. But like
mm,
try to find ways to actually do good and try to be a positive person and put that out there. But obviously that doesn't work out because, again, instead of wanting to do the human thing, he decides to do the magical thing, and then he ends up becoming the source.
mm.
So, because as a human, you should have sat out on this. You know what I'm saying? Because,
Yeah, yeah.
granted they might have died, but still you should have sat it out, because worrying about you partially is what got them into this issue. So it's like, I like Human Cole because of the potential that his story could have had. I like how he's still helpful, but he's more restrained in how he can be helpful. And I think that that makes for some like funny moments in the
Mhm.
show, because it makes them have to be more creative with Cole's character. And I think that makes for some really interesting storylines and funny moments with him as a human, but has all this, like centuries worth of demon knowledge. So I like Human Cole, but obviously it doesn't work out the way that it's supposed to. But I like him. I think that only because I think Phoebe and Cole could have ultimately worked out if Cole had stayed human and never took in the source.
Yeah. Ooh. Ooh, okay. Okay,
I
I
do.
like
I think they could have worked out because I think Cole could have found his way, because he was starting to find his way as a human and starting to fall into it. I mean, this is a trauma. Like, but not wanting to victimize Cole aside, he just experienced a huge trauma, right? As a
that.
human, he's never had to live as a human except for a small period of time. So he's now had an entire half of him, the half that he relied on the most for majority of his life, ripped away from him. All of his values, everything he's known was in demon world, in the evil world, and now he's having to relearn literally everything about how the world works, where it's not just about, honoring power and, it's about honoring empathy, and that's not something he's had to worry about. And so I think it could have provided for some great opportunities, but Cole is Cole, and Cole's always going to put himself in a situation where he doesn't make the right choice, and then it ended up resulting in how it ended up resulting. So I like Human Cole. Um, because I do think he is a little bit when you mentioned he wasn't really giving a personality, I would say over the last two episodes he hasn't really had a personality, but I feel like he gets his personality back once he becomes a human and he starts to like work his way through it. You see the kind of crazy like angry because he's still a crazy angry guy, but you see
Yeah.
that coming out, but you see how he's now having to navigate. I'm a human and I can't just literally shimmer my way out of trouble anymore. And so he starts to learn to not be so crazy and navigating all of that. So yeah, I like Human Cole. I mean, obviously, I wish there was a way that he could have been, Human Cole, but with power somehow, because
Mhm.
that could have been helpful. But yeah, there's just no world in which a charm one is going to be married to a demon, even a half demon.
Yeah. No, that is very, very true, especially
I
not in the
like
Charmed
that
universe.
Diamond.
What's
Oh,
that?
No, I was just saying I like that Diamond. Like I agree. If he hadn't, been went back to evil, I think
Yeah.
that they would have been all
mm,
right.
Yeah, they could have made it happen. They could have made it work out because she would have Phoebe could have been with somebody who was her equal in certain ways, but then she was also like the more powerful one in the situation. So I think that could have worked out for her.
yeah. I think that actually brings up a pretty good discussion about and we're not going to have it today because I didn't catch y'all long enough, but a pretty good discussion about transferring to different types of magic. So, and that's really inspired by what you're saying in conjunction with what Jim was saying earlier, because that it made me think about that, about how the source might have actually been a witch who turned evil. So it and we didn't really get a chance to talk about that, but it makes me wonder if Cole could have turned maybe not into a witch, but into a magical human or something of the sort, like where he still had access to magic and could do things, but he's not a witch, you know,
Yeah.
like what that would look like. Very interesting. Deanna, do you have any kind of closing thoughts on Human Cole?
He wasn't my favorite,
Oh,
but he was there. He wasn't my favorite.
I'm screaming.
I okay, unpopular opinion, and I know that term is used a lot, but it might have really been it. This might I don't know. Anyways, I like I liked what Cole was it? The Cole that was collecting all the powers from that wasteland place. He
Hmm.
was just so unhinged in like a funny way to me. I like that Cole. Oh, Human Cole was just he was fine, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Jim Anthony, what about you? What do you think about Human Cole?
I said earlier, he's definitely not my favorite. However, I like I can learn to appreciate the the manic aspects of Human Cole. Like when I don't want to go too far ahead, but like when he starts helping or wants to help Paige in cases and things like that. I can appreciate that because of his past history, right? But with him being a demon or half demon all of his life, he doesn't know how to dial back the excessiveness, or he doesn't know what the line is between being assertive and being abusive.
Right.
So there's a it's gonna sound crazy, but there's a acceptingness, if you will. I can accept that the abusive nature coming from Balthazar slash Cole, but
Mhm.
not human Cole. So that's
Mhm.
why I enjoy the anger, the manicness, the
Oh,
power that half Balthazar, half Cole gives us versus human Cole. Human Cole, I enjoy on the sense of the craze that he brings to trying to fit in somewhere, trying to get in where he fits in. But it's just like, bro, the plane is full. So you have to catch the next one, and that's okay too, because you'll still get to your destination, but it's just not your time right now.
yeah.
True. I also like now that you mention it, Jim, I also do feel like Phoebe and Cole's relationship when he was a human was much less toxic. You know, the beginning was a little bit of an issue, right? But it was less toxic and less aggressive because like even that whole thing when like Phoebe was struggling with the idea of being lost in the identity, and I know Grams's ring was also cursing her at the same time, but like Cole wasn't his normal like just get over yourself type of self. He actually was more supportive of her and those fears than he had been in previous time when she'd expressed fears to him, where he was just like, we'll get through it because we love each other. He was like, no, you shouldn't feel that way because I'm not putting that on you. I don't want you to think that I think that way. I want to make sure I'm clear about that. And before he wouldn't have like said it in that sort of way. He would have been like, you're freaking out over nothing. You're worrying about nothing. He would have just brushed it aside. And so that's why that's why I feel like their relationship had the potential to work out when he was human because he was approaching it as a human relationship, not opposed to like I'm a demon who needs to protect my woman, you know?
I don't even think about their relationship in the sense like when he come like for the so to answer your question, yes, I understand what you're saying. Let me start by saying that. I understand exactly what you're saying, but it's
Yeah.
like I don't even think about their relationship when it comes to him being human only because Phoebe fell in love with the demon.
Mm.
I don't see her falling in love with Cole.
Mm. Oh, that's
Interesting.
interesting.
Oh,
Being because she fell in love with manipulation, power, unbeknownst to her, she fell in love with manipulation, power, and aggression because Cole wasn't who she fell in love with. Well, the human Cole we get now from now on isn't who Phoebe had in the beginning. So
Mm.
that's the only reason why I don't think about it. But I'm not saying you're wrong and saying that they possibly couldn't have a more insightful or better relationship with both being mortal now. I just never like I don't like human calls, so maybe that's it too.
Mm.
No,
Let
yeah,
me
that
just call
makes
a
it.
spade
That
a
makes sense.
spade.
Yeah. No, I definitely think that makes sense for sure.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. I've never thought about that before.
this is why I love the rewatch, though. I love all the different perspectives and things because I just watch the show kind of in a one dimensional comfort way. And it makes me think so much and see so much more when I'm watching the show.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Because it's like you have like certain thoughts about a show, like when you're watching any TV show, right? But it's
Yeah.
like when you get to people who have an affinity for a show, and then you get to people who think about this, I'm just like this is
Yeah.
I was just telling my mother this earlier. It's like this is the type of space I've never thought would have ever existed for me. So to
Right.
have like an
I'm
intelligent
so
space
grateful.
like this,
Yeah. I
Her.
mean,
Yeah. No, absolutely. You're right, 100%.
I love that. Look at us. Look at us being the space that the world needs.
okay.
no, seriously, that part.
My God. Whew.
What do you guys think about the what I well, now what do you guys think about what I just said? No, but what do you guys think about her falling in love with evil Cole or Balthazar versus having a relationship with human Cole?
I could see that.
But see, you know what? Let me say this because when you said that, what it immediately made me start thinking about Phoebe loves, I think, the fact that she had to work to get him. And so if
Mm,
he was human, I don't at that point in her life, let me say that at that point in her life, if she had met him as strictly as a human and he had just been available to her, I don't know how interested Phoebe would have been long term.
Because she was attracted to that mystery, that lore. Like she
Mm-hmm.
wanted
yeah.
to find out like what he was about, kind of.
She knew there was something
Mm-hmm.
more to him.
Because she was new in school and she was like starting all these new things and she was just like curious about life again. So she was just like, what is this, honey?
Yep. And making love my baby down, but I gotta say it, making that opportunity for him to choose her, like whatever this secret
Mm.
is that he has going on, whatever this thing is, I'll be enough for him to choose me. I'll be enough for him to da 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 da. And I think if he had just been a human, she would have just been like, whatever. Because like by the time she gets to Jason, I think that she is such a different person that it's really not fair
Yeah.
necessarily compare her relationship with him as a human because I just don't think that that's the same Phoebe. She's grown up, she's got a job,
A
she
career.
a
And she
career,
learned from that.
Hmm.
and she
And
learned,
she was basically HBIC next to Elise
she was.
until Jason came in.
Hmm. Hmm. So I just don't think it's fair to compare those two relationships, but definitely that version of Phoebe, I could see her probably going out on a date with him because he's fine as hell. She probably had sex with him. I would
Mhm.
have, but
You can compare Balthazar and Phoebe's relationship to Jason and Phoebe.
no, you hush.
No,
People,
no, 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 no. Hear me out. Hear me out. Because of the power aspect, the aggressiveness, or that's not a word, the aggression, the aggression, and the power play there. Like she's Balthazar was, at her power level or a little higher sometimes. Jason was, over top of her as her boss. So that's what I mean in comparison to that. Because Phoebe, like you said, she likes a challenge.
that is true, actually. I stand me some Jason, but that's very, very true because she was in a predicament where this man literally could have told her at any point, like, "Girl, you got to get up out of here,"
Yep.
just because he was mad at her. But she was. It's a good thing he wasn't that kind of person. But that's actually very interesting. I'm
And that's
actually
what made me just
wondering.
think about that. Because I did like Jason, but it's just like, eh.
Oh.
I also think Phoebe and Balthazar Cole, their relationship started with a lie. So
Mm-hmm.
building on from there, even though he told the truth eventually, or not even told the truth, but the truth was found out, like it's different than her coming into this relationship with human Cole with open eyes and seeing all of his flaws from the get-go.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's a different form of acceptance.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Mm. Well, y'all, I think that we are going to go ahead wrap it on up. This discussion will be available on Le Patreon as well as the Power of G podcast, and it'll be up on YouTube, and it'll be sometime soon. So keep your eyes peeled, and I hope that everyone enjoyed this discussion as much as I did.
Yes, it was an
Yes,
Yes.
amazing
yes, yes,
discussion
yep, it
tonight.
was good.
Always.
Purr, purr, purr. Well, I'm going to go ahead and let everyone go. I hope that y'all have a great rest of the evening, and I will be talking back to you.
Thank you.
Bye
Night,
bye.
guys.
Bye, everybody.
Good night.
Bye.
Bye.